What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast. I am your host, Brett Coleman, here with my wonderful co-host, EJ Snyder. We are in part 2 of our 2021 NFL Draft recap of, 10, 11 parts, something like that this year.
If you listen to the internet, they said 150. So,
yeah, we got a long way to go, people. But I'm excited. Today we're doing our 3 favorite draft classes each, and then after this episode, we're going to be moving into our division by division breakdowns that I'm sure you're all familiar with. Also, we have a fantastic interview later this episode with Matt Bowen, which you really have to stay tuned and check out. It's amazing. He's amazing. I can't wait. But before we get into all this, EJ, buddy, how you doing? What are you drinking?
I'm excited. It's, the draft is over, but now it's really starting to settle in. Which teams did well? They're starting to make those post-draft additions to kind of fill in the holes, and you're starting to sort of see, rookie mini camp happen. Started to see some pictures of guys in pads. It's coming back. Football on the field again, so that's pretty exciting. I am drinking a local brewery, Silver City Brewery, out of Paulsbo, Washington, and this is their Sonic Rain American Pale Ale, about 5.5 by volume. Good, light, drinkable summer beer with enough flavor. I really like pales of late. It's one of the styles that I think is getting a lot more attention lately, and it used to be just pales were just like flavorless and yellow, and now there's all sort of different flavor profiles being put together, and Silver City does great stuff. What are you drinking?
Well, I just killed the last little bit that I had in this bottle of Monkey Shoulder, my favorite blended scotch. Gave myself the most generous pour of all time, as you can see, so it's going to be a long episode. I apologize if I'm a little bit out there by the end of it, because this is a very generous pour, but yeah.
Monkey Shoulder is good stuff.
Oh, it's great stuff. But
I'm familiar with Monkey Shoulder. That's tasty stuff. It's good for mixing, good for drinking straight. So.
Oh, it's good for everything. Also makes a mean penicillin. I'll just say that. If you're ever making a penicillin, use Monkey Shoulder. And Lefroy float. It's important. It has to be Lefroy. I've been told that by many a bartender.
Okay, I just thought you'd let it sit on your shelf for too long and we're making penicillin. I was like, I could think of a cheaper alternative. But the drink penicillin. Got it.
Why don't we get into these 3 favorite draft classes of ours? And we have certain criteria, I guess you could say. It's not just, who's picking at the top of every round. Obviously, you're getting more higher valued players if you're picking early in the draft. It's not quite that simple. EJ, take us through what are our criteria for these countdowns of 3 apiece for our favorite teams.
Yeah, absolutely. First thing, it's subjective. Every time you look at a draft class, everybody's going to have a different take on it. And the bottom line is we don't really know for 2 or 3 years with the draft class. Grading a draft right after it happens is a bit like calling the tree you just planted and saying, nope, that thing's going to make the best fruit. Like, it might, but there's a lot that can happen between the time you plant it and the time you're harvesting that fruit. Same way with NFL draft classes. 2 or 3 years, situation matters, injuries happen, all kinds of things can happen. So at first, it's subjective. And these are the drafts that we liked for a bunch of reasons. Player fits, insane value, consistency, top to bottom was a big one for me of the whole class. And in a few years, we'll see how they all pan out. But these are the ones that as we were going through the draft or right after the draft concluded, I look back, you look back, and we went, oh man, they just killed it. Like, they killed it. They got great fits for their team, for their scheme, for their coaches, and they got good value all the way through. There was a lot of drafts, and I'm just going to put it out there right now. Everybody's going to say, EJ, why didn't you talk about Chicago? Chicago was amazing. Chicago's kind of in its own class. If there's one team that had the largest change in the sort of overall tenor of their outlook, of their fan base, of their excitement from pre-draft to post-draft, it's Chicago hands down. Going into the draft, Chicago had no answer at quarterback. Andy Dalton sort of holding the door for who knows what, nothing left. There was uncertainty at offensive tackle, and nobody was really excited for 2021. Everybody had kind of just said, nope, it's a throwaway year. You come out of the draft with Justin Fields and Tevin Jenkins. You're now set with a young quarterback, and Young now looks to be left tackle. They're going to move Tevin to left. Totally different. Chicago ignites overnight. Everybody's excited about the season. Everybody's excited about the future. Everybody's excited about progress. Rest of the class was good, I think. But in terms of consistency overall, didn't make my list, didn't make your list. But that's why we're not talking about the Bears. They are the team with the biggest swing. And at the top, they hit it as strongly as anybody did. But we'll get into some of the reasons we liked other classes a little bit better, but we didn't want Bears fans have been hitting me pretty hard on social media. Why don't you talk more about the Bears draft? Look, they got Justin. If Justin works out, it's the best draft ever, period. End of story.
You know, what's interesting is the number 3 team on my list, there was kind of opposite emotional swings, because with the Bears fan base, it was a swing from unbelievable depression to unbelievable happiness. And then with Denver, who's actually my number 3 team, I know even a lot of Broncos fans would disagree with me liking their draft this much because they passed on Justin Fields. There was the opposite swing of, oh my God, we're getting Justin Fields. You know, we don't have to deal with this whole Teddy Bridgewater versus Drew Lock thing. And then they passed on him. And there's a lot of Broncos fans that are still really pissed about that. But overall, I want to sell this Broncos class, because when you just look at the football players they took, the scheme fits, the talent values. You got Pat Surtain at 9 overall, who's a great corner. You got Javonte Williams in round 2 at pick 35 overall. Quinn Miners in round 3 at pick 98. Baron Browning comes off the board a little bit later in round 3 at pick 105. Caden Stearns, safety out of Texas in round 5. Jamar Johnson, a safety that you and I both really like a lot. Also in round 5, they were just loading up on safeties. They got Seth Williams from Auburn, who's kind of a jump ball specialist, who weirdly has a lot of highlights where jump balls get knocked away from him on SEC corner tape, but that's neither here nor there. You got Kerry Vincent Jr., who's a talented corner out of LSU in round 7. Jonathan Cooper, who was a defensive end that went like 3 rounds later than I expected him to in round 7. And then Marquise Spencer from Mississippi State, another defensive end for them. So overall, when you look at this class, Pat Surtain is going to fill that press corner role opposite of Kyle Fuller that Prince Amukamara did for Vic Fangio, and it's a dream fit. You and I both think that, again, you could debate the quarterback thing all day long. There's rumors that they're convinced they're going to get Aaron Rodgers in a trade, which is why they passed on quarterback. I have no idea. I'm not going to speculate. But just looking at Patrick Surtain's fit in that defense, the talent for the value, I think they knocked it out of the park. That was one of the safest picks they could have made, and they made it. Javonte Williams, again, I know it's a crowded backfield, but he's immediately... You could argue young Melvin Gordon versus Javonte Williams. But Melvin Gordon, at this point in his career, I don't think it's close. I think Javonte Williams is going to be the best running back in that backfield, and a hammer for them. Quinn Miners, an awesome interior lineman that could play guard or center for them. That's the thing, is they didn't even need him, but they took him because he was just the best player there. So he'll compete with, probably Cushenberry for center, maybe be a swing guard for them. Who knows? But either way, great value. Baron Browning, I actually think that he's not going to be Vic's new Roquan Smith. I think he's going to be Vic's new Leonard Floyd, which is a role that I actually like him a lot in. And I know they said we're going to start him inside, and if we need to move him outside, we'll move him outside. I think they're going to end up moving him outside, but I like him better there. And getting him in the 4th round, I think, is a good value for the athletic upside that he has in that role. A lot of people were saying he's going to be, like the next Navarro Bowman. Absolutely not. Athletically, sure. Instincts-wise and technique-wise, no. But you put him in a Leonard Floyd role outside where he's moving backwards as much as he's moving forwards, you can sell me on that. And then Stearns and Johnson backing up both of their safeties they have there. They're not going to start, but if you're 3rd and 4th safeties are Caden Stearns and Jamar Johnson, you're sitting pretty. And then Jonathan Cooper is another one I want to highlight in round 7, who was one of my favorite kind of inside-out defensive ends where you could put him on the edge. He plays the run really hard. He's got better hips than you think, but he's also a very talented interior rusher as well, which you saw a lot at the Senior Bowl. Underrated power, underrated quickness, should not have gone in the 7th round. But overall, again, if you just want to ignore the present quarterback situation, because Lord knows what's going to happen there, the football players that they took, they killed it.
Yeah, 1 through 4, it's a very difficult draft to argue with outside of the quarterback issue. If you just take it with who they chose and not who they could have chosen, it should have been quarterback, because again, we don't know who the opening day starter is going to be. Not speculating is probably a wise choice there. But if you just look at Surtain, Williams, Miners, and Browning, and the other stuff, look, those are lottery tickets, good lottery tickets. I think they took nice swings. I especially like Cooper as a value. But just the strength of that class in the top 4 is as strong as any class in the league outside of speculation about quarterback. And I have to thank the Broncos, because if they hadn't taken Pat Surtain, no way Justin Fields ends up in Chicago.
Yeah.
No way, because everybody had Surtain penciled in at number 10, and the first domino was, honestly, I'd say J.C. Horn with the Panthers. But
yeah,
when the Broncos took Surtain, suddenly the Dallas pick was no longer a lock. They were willing to trade out. Another team was willing to trade up. They weren't after quarterback, and the dominoes started to fall that allowed Justin Fields to end up in Chicago. So thank you for that. But Surtain's a tremendous fit in that defense. He was my CB1 in this draft, I think, with good reason. Now, I think J.C. Horn has a higher ceiling, but Surtain is the guy that is, I think, most complete in the role. And again, with that system fit, he has the best chance to succeed. If something goes wrong there, it's not because he doesn't have coaches that understand how to use his talent. It's going to be injury or something else, because that defense with he and Fuller as the corners and their safeties is as strong a secondary as is going. You could put that up against any secondary in the league right now. Javonte Williams was my RB1, so you get my corner 1 in round 1, my running back 2 in round 2, or my running back 1 in round 2. Miners, like you said, great value. And then I love Browning more than you did. And I think, again, where he went, that top 4 is just lockdown work by them. Really, really strong.
It's the best draft class that I've ever seen a fan base hate, solely because of what happened at quarterback. And I'm not speaking for all Broncos fans. There's plenty of Broncos fans that agree with me and love the class, but there's a lot of Broncos fans that were like, pass on a quarterback, automatic fail. And I'm like, well, football's a little bit more complicated than that. You still got to have a good roster, and they have a really good roster. So
yeah.
Now, why don't we take me to your number 3 team, which is one that I heavily considered putting on my list until I saw that you already put them. But I think you and I were in agreement of how much we love what they're building there up in Detroit. Take me through the Lions.
Yeah, this is a change. And again, sea change for the Lions in the offseason. New coach, new general manager. Never quite sure how that combination is going to work. It almost never works like the combination it's replacing, because they got replaced for a reason. Things weren't going so well. New energy, new attitude, new value system. And we got to see the new brain trust for the Lions come in. And throughout the weekend was just really moved by how solid the class that they were putting together was. Lions had a lot of work to do. They were not going to be one player away, not even 1 year away. They're probably 2.5 good draft classes and some decent luck in free agency from being where they want to be. They really were starting with a full rebuild, and that's kind of a strange spot to be in the NFL these days. There's all this reload stuff, but not really ground-up rebuilds. This was a ground-up rebuild after the Matt Patricia era, and they start off by not looking a gift horse in the mouth and taking Penei Sewell, round 1, pick 7. The line that the Lions are putting together, 4 of their 5 starters are under 24 and locked in for the next 4 years. They have, and they just locked up Frank Ragnow long term as well. So they have a wall. They have built a wall in front of whoever's going to play quarterback. That's Jared Goff for right now. If they go out and get a quarterback next year, he's going to have all the protection in the world, and that's a great way to start. They'll build weapons around. But they really started with Sewell, not trying to do something cute, saying, hey, this is a player we need. We need players everywhere. It's kind of an advantage of a rebuild. There's not too many positions where you're like, no, we're set. We'll go for value somewhere else. It's like, this is the best player on the board. We need him. We're taking him. So Penei Sewell has been talked about at length. Probably don't need to go into who he is as a player. And then in round 2, pick 41, they get Levi Onwuzurike out of Washington, defensive tackle, penetrator, guy we like, who I think can probably play at a higher level in their scheme because he's going to see less straight 3-man rushes.
For once.
Yeah. Yes. So we saw him at the Senior Bowl. He performed really well against top talent, another guy that had opted out. But they came right back in round 3 and got Aleem McNeil, who was the guy that was really in the running to sort of compete with Levi in this draft as the 3-tech penetrator, guy that can really get upfield and create a lot of havoc. Now they have them both. And at that point, it was a little bit more clear to me, oh, okay, now we know what they're going to do. They're probably going to play those guys side by side. They're looking at a penetrating, one gap, upfield penetrating defensive line. This is what they're going to build up front. They already have built their offensive line. They're building from the inside out. This is a fairly classic NFL model. And I started to say, okay, all right, they're just sticking and staying, right? They're taking value as it comes down their board, and they're building from the inside out. They follow that up in round 3 with a big corner out of Syracuse, Melifonwu. Not many guys at his size move like he does, and we kind of liked their corner talent before. Their top pick from last year wildly underperformed. I think that was more of his scheme and coaching fit. He really didn't gel with what Patricia and his staff were doing. It's not a bad player. Jeffrey Okudah, a very good player, and I think we're going to see a serious, you can call it a rebound. I think he's just much more comfortable in the system they're going to put together. You add Melifonwu, some of their other defensive assets in that secondary. You put more defensive line assets in front of it, which they did in the 2 rounds before that. And you start to see, okay, this is a defense that they're adding basically high skill positions, high value skill positions. They come back in round 4. They definitely need wide receivers. They only had one before they started into free agency with Quintez Cephas. They had Amon-Ra St. Brown out of USC. I think he adds a slot element for them. He can play outside, but they have players that are going to play outside there. He's at worst their wide receiver 4. You and I both think he's probably going to end up as wide receiver 3 because he plays inside a little bit more than the guys they have. I think he's going to see a lot of opportunities, and we've seen, to your point, Jared Goff be very comfortable with slot receivers coming from LA. He used all 4 of his wide receivers. He would rotate throughout the weeks of the season. Different guys would be highlighted in the game plan. He has no problem distributing the ball, so that speaks pretty well for St. Brown. Then they come back and get one of the sneakiest picks of the whole draft. Derek Barnes, linebacker out of Purdue. Guy I loved. As soon as I saw his Senior Bowl tape, I watched him before the Senior Bowl, but his performance at the Senior Bowl, he had some really good coverage reps. He's got great physical dimensions. And typically saw him ranked in the 200s, which I thought was way too low. I thought, 150 is probably about where I'd value him.
Yeah, that's really low.
But all boards, almost across the board, even at the end of the process, he'd only snuck up to maybe 180, 185 on some boards. Still terribly undervalued for a really versatile player. Lions pick him up, say we're going to put him in the middle. They say he's our Mike. He's a smart player. He's versatile. We love what he brings. They pick him at 114 overall, which was a little rich, I think, but I love the fit. I love where he's going. I love the staff's plan for him. So all those things sort of make that a really solid choice, even if it seemed a little bit early to fans. And then they come back in round 7 to pick 257 and get Jamar Jefferson. And I love him, running back out of Oregon State. Again, you can get running backs late that are valued. It's not like he needs to start. They have their starter. They picked him high last year. I think he's going to ascend. Kerryon Johnson gets released right after the draft. Never could get right after injuries. I think Jamar Jefferson could surprise some people. There's already reports out of minicamp that he looked a little bit quicker than we thought he was for a 7th rounder. And if you watch his tape, that's not surprising. I think he can be RB2. Just a great class top to bottom. When we get to the divisional preview, we're going to talk about who they added in UDFA, which was significant to kind of further enhance the value of the class and really sell that we're building something new and you have an opportunity to make this team and possibly start. They seem to have leveraged that message with this draft class really, really well. So kind of A+ marks for a first class. They just really didn't have any missteps top to bottom. When I'm talking about consistency of the class, liked every player they picked. They had a plan, stuck to it, got value, and honestly made their team quite a bit better in what was their first sort of turn, turn at the wheel. And that's all you can ask out of a new staff. I have to say, as a Bears fan, I was slightly distressed. It was always good to have Patricia and his staff just throwing random darts that you didn't think were going to work out, and you didn't fear them that much. This is logical. It makes sense. They have a plan. They made their team a lot better. That's, after a couple more years of this, that's going to be really concerning.
I think how they're building their team is a very similar way to how they built around Jared Goff in LA, which is, if you don't have an elite quarterback, you better be elite in the trenches on both sides of the ball, because a great quarterback can make up for an average to below average offensive line in certain ways, especially if they're mobile. But a great offensive line can make up for an average quarterback by giving him a shitload of time to throw, especially if he's not that mobile like Jared Goff. And when Jared Goff was at his best in LA, it's when that offensive line was firing on all cylinders back in 2018, I think it was, before they ran into that buzzsaw in Chicago and got exposed a little bit. And then Belichick ran basically the same game plan and beat him in the Super Bowl. But again, that offense was great because their offensive line was great. And Todd Gurley was, had somewhat healthy knees at that point. And so I think Detroit, is copying that model of like, hey, we've got Jared Goff, who, if you give him good protection, he's an accurate trigger man who can work a bunch of different receivers and play point guard for you. He doesn't have to be special if you're able to run the ball really well and protect really well if you get into a third and long situation occasionally. So I really love that they're building to their quarterback's strengths and mostly weaknesses. And then on defense, the defensive line, or really the front seven that they're building to complement a bunch of young secondary talent that you and I still believe in, and that I think Aaron Glenn specifically, who's coming over to be their DC, he was the DB coach for the Saints the last 4 years and was a phenomenal one at that, one of the best secondary coaches in the league. And we've seen Okudah already talk about how much he's learned from Aaron Glenn, just barely knowing the guy. Same guy who developed Marshawn Lattimore, by the way, another Ohio State corner. So I think their secondary is going to be fine. They have a lot of young talent there already, but what they've done to the front seven, bringing in Levi, bringing in McNeil, Derek Barnes, who I had a chat with Jim Nagy before the draft, and I was talking about Barnes and how much I liked him, how versatile he was as a pass rusher, how he'd basically be like a Dante Hightower type player. And the line that he said that stuck with me is, however high you think Derek Barnes is going, it's going to be higher. And he was right. He was absolutely right. And so, again, is he going to be a guy that's going to be great in coverage? No, but he's going to do everything else really, really well. Rush the passer, stop the run, be in the right place at the right time. Like, they are building with their quarterback in mind, knowing who Jared Goff is. Like, they traded for Jared Goff knowing who Jared Goff is, and they built their roster around that, and I think they did a phenomenal job at it.
Yeah, one thing about Barnes is coverage in the short area, really between the hashes in the box, he's good. Is he going to cover, ex-speedy slot receiver on a straight man crosser? No, he's not. Can he drape the sort of less mobile tight end? Yeah, he can. And that's something I think they're going to use for versatility. And yeah, you build a line. Like, I don't think Jared Goff's ever had a tight end as good as Hawkinson, right? That's going to be his new best friend.
Mm-hmm.
And then you add complementary receivers. You sign a couple in free agency. You draft one. You bring a couple in UDFA. You just kind of try and make a receiving core that has a lot of options because he can be a distributor. You've already got the strong line. We know you can get running assets. They already have a very highly drafted running back. Now they go and get some other running assets to complement that. They're building a functional system that doesn't depend on Jared Goff playing hero ball, which is a really smart approach.
Yeah. I would say it's a similar type of deal for my number 2 team, the New York Jets, where they're not really putting a whole lot on Zach Wilson early, which I think is great for Wilson's development. Obviously they're investing a very high pick in Wilson, but when you look at the supporting structure they're putting around him and the offense that they're going to be running, which is a very run-heavy system, we're assuming, especially with the offensive line they're building, he's not going to have to do everything like, say, Joe Burrow had to do everything as a rookie for Cincinnati, and Justin Herbert at times had to do everything for the Chargers to make them functional. It's not going to be the same type of ordeal for Zach Wilson. So let me run through this Jets class because I really, really loved it. Again, Zach Wilson at number 2. Was he my number 2 quarterback? No. That doesn't mean that I don't think that he wasn't worth the pick, if that makes sense. Like, there's 4 guys that you could have argued worth top 2 picks in this class. So just because he wasn't my QB2, which was Justin Fields, and then Trey Lance was my QB3, he was my QB4 that went QB2. But again, it's splitting hairs. It's more about where you end up in situation that I think determines the success for these guys, not just my pre-draft rankings. So again, if he works out, that this draft is already a home run. And I think you could ask the Chiefs to confirm that, because you look at their 2017 class and pretty much everybody outside of Pat Mahomes didn't work out for them. But they got Pat Mahomes, so that's a successful class. If Wilson works out, this is a good class for them. But then they traded back up from 23 to 14 to get Elijah Vera Tucker. Heavily criticized pick because they gave up extra assets to get a guard. I personally am of the belief that there weren't that many guards, maybe 2 in this whole class, that have Vera Tucker's skill set, which is a perfect fit for the offense they want to run. If you want to run a lot of outside zone, you need guards that can reach block a 3 technique all by themselves without any help from the tackle. You need to have a guy that can locate and track a speedy 215-pound linebacker on the second level and actually make that block. Elijah Vera Tucker can do that. Not a whole lot of guards can, and they knew that. For as much depth as there is on the interior, you have to factor in system, and he's one of the few guards that really fits what they want to do in that system. So I was totally fine with picking him at 14. You get Elijah Moore in the top of the second round. I mean, my God, that's an incredible value. Michael Carter in round 4, because remember, they gave up the third rounders for Elijah Vera Tucker, but you come back and you get a running back that you could have argued gone 40 picks ahead of that, and you get him in round 4. Who cares that you gave up the third rounders? You're still getting a third round talent, if not better, in Michael Carter in round 4. Disgusting pick. You get Jamian Sherwood, and then in round 5, and then 1 round later you get Hamza Nasruddin, who I think are basically going to be the same guy for them, which is Jeff Ulbrich doing the most Jeff Ulbrich thing ever, which is like, hey, find me this 215 to 220 pound lanky linebacker with 34-inch arms and I'll make it work. Is he a former safety? That's a bonus. I'll make it work, because he's done that many, many, many times at this point. Like, he has a type for linebacker, which is, I don't want to say smaller, but more compact, range, fast, slippery off blocks. Like, that is Sherwood and Nasruddin. Sherwood's a little bit faster, Nasruddin's a little bit longer, but again, that's very much in that Ulbrich mold of smaller, quicker linebacker, which he's done before with Deion Jones, Eric Kendricks, the list goes on and on. Love those 2 picks back to back. One of them will probably work out. Michael Carter, who's probably going to be a special teams guy, maybe work his way in as a nickel, but I probably expect special teams. Jason Pinnock, I mean, good Lord, you and I loved him, and he's like a perfect fit at boundary corner for them. I mean, he's... If you were going to say who's the most Seahawky player in this draft, Jason Pinnock would have been my answer. Like, he's such a perfect fit for press boundary corner. Salah's going to love him in that role. And then you got Brandon Nichols, who's, again, he's probably going to special teamer. And then John Marshall, twitched up athlete. Him going that late in round 6 for his athleticism. I understand he's raw as all get out, but an athlete like him with an RAS of 9.8 or something like that going in the 6th round is pretty nuts. So overall, again, you could have just stopped at Zach Wilson, and I thought this class would have been good, but you throw in the best guard in the class, a top 4 to 5 receiver, a absolutely dynamic running back, the DBs they got, the linebackers they got. The Jets murdered this draft, and I think even if they have a 30% hit rate, it's a transformational class for them.
Yeah, it sets them up for success. Again, a new staff, a lot like the Lions, different mentality, and you talked about fit, right? Fit and scheme. And would I be anywhere near as excited if Sherwood had gone most other places in this draft. Nah. He goes with Ulbrich, and you know that they're going to slide him forward and let him do what he does, which is sort of range in that forward short cone in the box and knock the snot out of people. Like, yeah, I'm pretty excited about that, actually. Hamps is, again, a clone of that. Elijah Moore was one of my favorites from early on. I turned you on to him like after probably my second piece of tape. I was like, this guy's going to be in my top 5 receivers. No doubt.
I hadn't even got to receivers yet, and you like sent me a text at like 11:30 at night. It just said Elijah Moore, and I was like, "What?" And you're like, "I love Elijah Moore."
No, that's it. I'm driving the bus. Hop on. Like, I was early in my receiver work, and I was like, it doesn't matter how many more I do. I'm not going to see more guys like this, right? Like, he just has all those things. Talked at length about Moore. We don't need to go into that again. But you pair him with one of the other guys that we really liked that we got to see at the Senior Bowl last year in Mims. Now you got Mims and Moore. You got Carter, who's extremely dynamic. Javonte Williams' backfield mate at UNC gives Wilson, again, weapons to where he doesn't have to play hero ball every week. You want to see him do that a little bit. You want to see the play break down and him be able to do what he was able to do at BYU, which is play outside structure, but you don't want that to be the norm, right? Like you said, not the heavy lift that Burrow had of anything that's going to happen is going to be on your shoulders. No, you'd like playmakers to make some plays, so you put a bunch of playmakers around him. Pinnock is a crazy value. I think about Pinnock developing, and he does need to develop, but he just has so many gifts that you get like him and Bryce Hall eventually as the boundary corners there. It's like,
yeah, I'm all right with that.
Yeah, and Marcus May, they're negotiating with him at safety right now to see if they can get him long term. They have your other favorite safety out of Cal. All of a sudden, that secondary with Saleh in charge of it starts to look like very powerful in that division and not anywhere near a knockoff or a knockover. The offensive line is solid and getting better. I know a lot of people went after the Vera Tucker pick, but we had Brandon Thorne on as our first pre-draft guest, and he loved AVT. Like, he was like, he's either for me, he's a guard first because that's where his best skill set is, and he will crush as a guard. Like, if you put him as a guard, he's not going to be good. He's going to crush. And it was okay.
I think at guard he had him as like 12th overall in this class. Like
he had
him really high. Yeah,
he had him like tackle 4 or 5. Sorry, Brandon, if I'm getting your rankings wrong, but he had him as guard like 1 or 2, like right at the top. He was like, nope. He's again, like you said, one of the few players in this class that's a difference maker at that spot, and that's why they went and got him. It's their belief. And it's not like they sacrificed everything else to be able to do it. They still filled out the rest of the class with a lot of value and players that we like in their system. So, again, top to bottom consistency, value, fit with scheme, the best chance to develop players like Sherwood. Whereas if he'd gone somewhere else, I would have been like, it seems early no matter when he got picked. Now I'm like, oh, I know what they're going to do with him, and I know who they're going to have do it to him. So, yeah, I'm good. That's a solid pick in that system. So the Jets, again, new staff, not a new GM, but a new coaching staff, seem to align pretty strongly on vision and be on the same page about what we're doing on offense, what we're doing on defense, what kind of players we want, and get value really top to bottom. So I'm with you. 30% hit rate out of this class, and Wilson being average or above means the New York Jets did really well for their franchise.
Now, one team that's strung together a few very strong drafts back to back to back, which is your number 2 team. This one, to me, felt like one of the classes in the NFL where it was just the rich getting richer. Every single time the Cleveland Browns made a pick, you and I just looked at each other and said, the value, my God. Like they didn't even need half these guys, but they just went after value. And why don't you take us through this class? Because you and I were ecstatic every single time the Browns were on the clock.
Yeah, they're building something in Cleveland. They had a very talented roster, which was a perfect accident, right? They were bad years and years in a row, so they ended up with high draft pick after high draft pick. They ended up with all this talent, but they couldn't really put it together. And they finally bring in a new GM. They get some front office stability. They bring in Stefanski last year to kind of say, all right, how are you going to bring all these insanely talented pieces together? And he does it, right? By late in the season, the Browns are hitting on all cylinders. There's an incredibly talented roster. We talked about it in our divisional preview last summer. Like, if they light the match, they have as much talent on this roster as anybody in the NFL, top to bottom. That roster's still there for the most part. They didn't have incredible losses. They're not that wildly successful team that breaks up after the Super Bowl, as most teams do, as long as you're not the Buccaneers and bring everybody back. But they haven't started that phase of their team building where they're losing insane amounts of talent. They still have all that talent. So your point about the fact that they didn't need half these guys is absolutely there. But Andrew Berry, man, he just kept the hammer down. He was like, I'm going to go with value. I'm going to go with fit. I'm going to keep doing the same thing and just keep the coffers full as guys do start to rotate out. And they do let them go for comp picks like their divisional rivals, the Ravens, do. And they start off in round one, staying true to their board, getting one of the top 4 corners at pick 26, Greg Newsome out of Northwestern. Super confident corner. I know those things usually go together, but he throughout the process said, I'm CB1. I don't care what you say about JC Horn. Like, you love to see that competition wise, especially going up against, the Steelers wide receiver core.
Yeah,
so
seriously.
Tremendous ad for them. The one player last year we said, man, if CEH goes to the Chiefs, it's over. And the one player that we kind of got together on in the pre-draft process and said, man, if there's a guy that goes to a place that sort of fits need and value and just lets a team do something it can't right now, it's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah to the Browns, right? And then they didn't pick him in round 1. And we were like, they're not going to get him. He's going to go top round 2 before they pick again. Well, no, he doesn't. Round 2, pick 52, they add JOK at what was largely a gaping hole. They've let a couple linebackers go. They have an all-world defensive line. They have a tremendous secondary, which they added to in free agency. Like, the front and the back of that defense are incredibly strong. The linebackers were kind of, if there was a part on the roster, and they add one of the most, if not the most dynamic linebacker in the draft at pick 52. And we look at each other and go, oh, man. Like, we said if he ended up there, we didn't think he would, and now he does. Tremendous pick by that staff. Round 3 was kind of my only quibble. Anthony Schwartz, wide receiver out of Auburn. My least favorite pick in their haul. Doesn't mean, again, it was a bad pick. Kind of like what you said about Zach Wilson, my quarterback 4 being pick 2. Doesn't mean he's bad. Like, I understand the plan for Schwartz. He has world-class speed. He has angle-breaking speed. And he's not just a track star. Like, he understands how to translate that to the football field, and he can go the distance. He is a guy that's going to absolutely stretch defenses that they're going to be able to use in creative ways. Stefanski showed no aversion to being creative, pulling out the trickeration, right? And Anthony Schwartz has a role in that for them that's going to be pretty threatening, because if you miss, he's gone. He has that kind of speed. James Hudson, a guy I liked on tape but tested pretty poorly, had a decent Senior Bowl, and they get him in round 4, pick 110 as, again, he doesn't need to start for them. He's kind of their swing tackle, right? And he just can develop and hopefully hone what we saw on tape to be a more complete game. The rich getting richer is a very good way to describe that pick. One of my defensive gems stays in-state. Tommy Togiai, defensive tackle, Ohio State. They get him in the 4th round at 132. I love him. And going into that defensive line rotation, that's obscene.
Much later than I thought he would go to. I thought he was early round 3, maybe late 3 at most.
There was a whisper right before the draft started that the medical information in general for the whole class to the league for follow-ups had come out late. Like, some teams were getting it literally 6 or 7 days before the draft. And there was a whisper, I think it might have been Daniel Jeremiah, that said defensive tackle got hit extremely hard. Like, watch for the effects on defensive tackle, right? And we ended up seeing Marvin Wilson from Florida State go undrafted. That was a shocker after his 2019 tape. Guys like Togiai sliding down the board. a full round later than we thought they would. And I wonder if that didn't have something to do with it. But Togiai on that defensive line is just another versatile, penetrating, hard playing, down eating guy that can make plays. And then one of my favorite picks, round 5, 135, I described Tony Fields out of West Virginia as the poor man's JOK in this draft. Like I said, if you miss on JOK, go get Tony Fields. You're going to get 80-85% of his game. I described him as a Wolverine because he's ferocious and annoying. And they add him. They got JOK, and then they add Tony Fields. So they got JOK and his, either eventual running mate or his automatic backup. Either way, they're just stacking talent after talent. They get Richard LeCount, a guy that was injured, played great on SEC tape, tested terribly, but it was because he was in a motorcycle accident. He was injured. He wasn't fully recovered. Andrew Berry goes, I'll take the wild card. 5th round, 169 overall. That guy had great tape and was in the right place a lot of times against SEC offenses. Made a lot of plays. You want to know a note?
I can't remember if you were in the draft stream at this time. But on LeCount, because whatever episode it was before the draft, you and I both said there's no way, there's no universe in which Richard LeCount runs 4.8. It's not possible. He doesn't run 4.8.
Not on film.
With all the plays he made in the SEC, zero chance he runs 4.8. Everybody that I know loved him. And so I was on my little phone, texting my buddy, and they threw out the 40s for a lot of guys. Sure. And they were instead going off GPS data. And they have statistical models with the Browns because they're very analytic focused, and they take advantage of current technology because they're a smart organization now. And they have models that projects acceleration rate, long speed, and everything like that to basically just figure out what a healthy 40 would be. And he was timing, quote unquote, timing in the low 4.5s, which sounds a lot more accurate when you just watch him on tape where it's like, that dude can move. He's running down sweeps to, Devontae Smith, who is also very, very fast, with no problem. He's making plays from opposite numbers all the way to the other numbers as a single high safety. He's got range. Nobody runs 4.8 that has that kind of range. And so they looked at their GPS data and said, he's more like 4.52, somewhere around there. And I was like, all right, I believe that. And for him, who's going to fully recover from that motorcycle accident eventually, credit to him for still testing at the pro day despite not even being close to 100% and knowing that it might tank his draft stock, which it did. So credit for LeCount being still competitive, but also credit to the Browns for knowing that those numbers were bullshit and just drafting a really good football player based off GPS data. This is a new era of scouting. In a lot of years, he would have gone undrafted because we didn't have GPS data. Now we do, and it gave the Browns a very good football player.
Absolutely. This is a guy that, even if you told me he ran 4.6, I'd be like, I don't care. Look at all the plays he made when he was healthy on tape. He's got good length. He's got great intuition, which makes up at least a 10th for safeties, like knowing where you need to go and getting the extra half step on a break because you understand the ball's going there a half second before most guys do. LeCount's got that. He's got great length. And again, he's a good athlete. He made a ton of plays in the SEC, which is loaded with athletes. All the top playmakers that we're talking about that got drafted up high. SEC guys, right? LeCount made plays in that league over and over again. Not once. Like, he was a playmaker in that defense. So a crazy steal by Cleveland that late. And then they go get another guy that tested really poorly but had a great Senior Bowl in Demetric Felton. I just put offensive weapon out of UCLA because they ran him as a running back. He played more wide receiver at the Senior Bowl. Doesn't really matter where you line him up, but he is one of those guys that can win off the line as a wide receiver with just releases and quickness. Nobody could keep with him the whole week in Mobile. And they get him in round 6 to 11 because he is undersized and he tested incredibly poorly. But again, if you look at the tape, you look at him play against competition, he is a very difficult player to get a handle on. You want some fun, go watch his game against Washington State. Like,
oh my God,
they had no answers for him, none. He just did whatever he wanted on the football field against them. And I can't wait to see Stefanski use that as just like the 8th wild card in his back pocket on that offense and be like, hey, Dimitri, come here. I got one for you. Okay, just do this, right? We're going to run reverse Statue of Liberty, and you're going to be the guy, right?
Oh, God.
It's going to happen at least once because Stefanski and his staff showed a real aggressiveness in that play calling. Like once a week, they came up with something that was like, what? Okay. And Felton's going to get one of those this year. Probably not more than a couple, but he's going to get one of those this year. And he's going to take it away is because he's a tough guy to track down. So again, you start with a team that's pretty loaded top to bottom, was starting to compete really at the highest level of football at the end of last year, was involved in what you and I both thought was the game of the year. So one of those teams that trends solidly late, those teams often are set up for success the next year. Not a ton of losses, a ton of great additions, especially where they had needs. Andrew Berry and his staff, I swear, I've joked right after the draft. I said, man, you better get working on that Berry statue because you're going to need it like pretty quick. And if they keep putting in drafts like this, I'm not hardly kidding. I mean, it is going to happen.
After they picked Felton, I texted my buddy and I asked him, do you want him at running back or receiver? And he sent back, does it have to be one?
Yeah.
That's how it's going to be. Like they're going to line up,
yeah,
with him as a slot receiver because he'd be a great slot receiver. Defenses are going to respond with nickel because there's no linebacker in the league other than maybe like 3 of them that you would trust to cover him in the slot, and safeties as well. And all of a sudden they're going to put him in the backfield and put Kareem Hunt at fullback. And all of a sudden they're running ISO with Kareem Hunt at fullback because he can do that against nickel, and you're fucked. Like they're gonna mess with people with Felton because he can do either or. Again, this whole class, like every single time they made a pick, we knew exactly why they did it. There was not a single head scratcher for me out of the entire class. There's a clear identity with this team. And everything that Cleveland already did well got better, and everything that they didn't do well also got better. Like this was a home run class from start to finish. I'm not going to say that they're a shoe-in for the AFC North crown, but man, Baltimore and Pittsburgh, they're going to have a tough fight on their hands every single time Cleveland comes to town because they don't have any weaknesses. There's not a single weakness on this entire roster.
No, and they made some of their strengths stronger. You and I were talking about this. We were looking at their cornerback depth, right? And we're like, honestly, with their free agent additions, is their third safety Grant Delpit?
Yeah.
Right? If your third safety is a guy that was projected to be the top safety in last year's draft, like that's your rotational guy. And that's how this draft looks all the way around, with maybe the exception of linebacker because they were kind of thin there. But like Tommy Togiai is what, your 5th defensive line, 6th defensive line?
Because you got Billings and Jordan Elliott, you got Malik Jackson. They signed Malik McDowell because why the fuck not? Like,
take a shot.
Who cares? He's a freak of nature. Like if he
everybody's
makes the roster,
coming back. We got TiVo, we got Kelvin Benjamin. Take a shot on Malik. Why not?
Kelvin Benjamin, the tight end now, by the way.
Well, I have jokes, but I'm just going to leave them.
I'm just saying, I think it's a good career move for him. I'd rather him be tight end. I mean, honestly, I wanted him to be at tight end for most of his career as a receiver anyway. So,
sure thing.
And good for him for having the mental toughness to get through what he had to get through in his life and trying to make it back in the league. Good on you, Kelvin Benjamin. Just random note there. I want to go to my number 1 team here, and it was tough. It was tough for all these teams because you could argue a bunch of them for number 1. But when I look at what the Miami Dolphins did, I mean, we talk about, first 4 picks. If you start out your draft with Jalen Waddle, Jalen Phillips, Javon Holland, and Leon Eichenberg, you can make no other picks for the rest of the draft and go home happy. But then, on top of that, adding Hunter Long, Larnell Coleman, and Garrett Dokes, or is it Garrett or Jared? I never actually knew, because when you watch on All 22, they don't say his name. So I apologize.
It's terrible when it's silent. I would say Jared if I had to venture a guess, but it is a guess.
The thing that stuck out with me for him, pass protection, like that dude is a dog in pass protection. And I think they brought him in solely for special teams, and you're going to be our dude that you bring in on third down to pass protect for Tua and then check release if nobody comes, because he's really, really good at that. Not so great at everything else, but he's already probably the best backfield pass protector on the roster, in my opinion. But, going through the rest of who they brought in, Jalen Waddle, dynamic receiver. Whether he's working as a deep threat, whether it's getting him the ball in space on screens, giving him carries, whatever you want to do with him. I mean, he can score from literally anywhere else on the field. And I know people say don't compare anybody to Tyreek Hill. Tyreek is a unicorn. I agree. But in terms of physical skill set, acceleration, like just pure acceleration, Waddle's one of the closest guys to Tyreek in the league. And Tyreek might be one of, 2 guys that have better acceleration than Waddle, and that's still stretching it. Like, it is rare bursts. I know that Ruggs timed 4.2, he had the long speed and everything like that, but in terms of like the first 15 yards, who's getting up to their top speed the fastest? It is Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. And that's probably why he went ahead of Devontae Smith, because a lot of coaching staffs say, like, just give me the dude that has the rare physical skill set. And his burst is that rare where it comes along maybe once every 4 or 5 years. The last guy to come out that had it was probably Tyreek. So just on pure rarity of skill set, Jalen Waddle was worth that pick at number 6. And then you get Jalen Phillips, who was my number 1 edge rusher, all the way down at pick 18. I did not think he was going to get that far. I had him going, I think, number 11 to the Giants in my mock draft. So he slid probably because of medical, but he's much better than the 18th overall pick. Like, in any normal year, I don't think that he would have gone that late, because when you look at length, strength, bend, technique, motor, like, he's got everything. He has everything you want in an edge rusher, and getting him that late solely because of medical is lucky for Miami. It's flat out luck that he was there. So I love that pick for them. And then you get Javon Holland, who immediately you're projecting him as Devin McCourty in that defense, because he's got that same skill set as somebody who can play post safety or play nickel corner for you, which McCourty did for Flores in New England. He played both. Holland is going to be that guy where, depending on game plan for the week, hey, if we want to play mostly like single high, you're going to be our post safety because you can do it. Or if we really need you at nickel, we're going to put you at nickel because you can do it. So I love that pick for them. And then Liam Eichenberg, solid as you can get for a day 2 tackle prospect. You slide him to right tackle. You put Robert Hunt inside, which they were reported before the draft to be moving Robert Hunt inside. And again, the offensive line isn't flashy, but I don't see any weaknesses there either. And for an offense that wants to get the ball out in under 2.5 seconds anyway to a guy like Jalen Waddle that can make stuff happen with yards after the catch because he's so freaking dynamic, you can kind of see where everything is coming together here. It's quick game, it's running the ball, it's making sure that Tua doesn't have to do too much. And then you play really good defense with everything they got on the back end. I mean, God, Miami's loaded. Again, it's just like Cleveland, where they have no weaknesses on the roster, with the one asterisk being maybe if Tua doesn't work out. That's the one thing you can question, but we still don't know. But in terms of everything else on the roster, like, it is probably one of the 5 or 6 best top to bottom talented rosters in the entire league.
Yeah, their top 3 really was the piece for me. Their depth later down is the reason I didn't pick them as one of my top 3 classes. But those top 3 choices were, and if you're going to be good in the draft, you got to hit on your high choices. Typically your 1s and 2s, but 3s can add a lot of value. And then there's guys like Ryan Pace who do really well consistently with 3s and 4s and 5s specifically. But if you're not hitting on the 1s and 2s, it doesn't much matter. And that, Jalen, and Javon, that was it for me. Like, I was like, you got 3 really good players. 3 players I liked as the top 1 or 2 at their position in the draft. Right? I like Richie Grant at safety, and Javon Holland was right there. Right? Trevin Moehrig, like those three guys were the three guys that I felt like had versatility, all had corner-like skills. Really, Richie Grant and Javon Holland played more of true sort of corner lineups than Moehrig did. But those are the three guys that I was like, any one of those three can fit kind of any system because they can all play single high deep. They're fast enough to play man, and two of them literally have corner reps on their resume that look really good.
Mm-hmm.
So you go out, and again, Jalen Phillips, one of the top edge rushers. If you're comfortable with his medical, he had a greater package of all the things you were talking about hustle, skill, drive, moves, combination, production. Like, he was definitely one of the top players as long as you're okay with the medical. And then Waddle, everything you said about him as a wide receiver and a crazy dynamic special teams threat. Like a guy that can absolutely split one off. You don't have to miss by much, and he is going to make you pay, and you're not going to catch him because of that speed. So just those top three. Eichenberg, not really sure about their plan. I'm with you. He's not flashy. You and I watched him about a week before the draft. We watched the whole Notre Dame offensive line because there were so many guys that were getting drafted off that line again, and just kind of picked and choose our sort of favorite plays. And Eichenberg's one of those guys that he feels better at guard to me. Sure, you can play him at tackle. I'm with you that right is probably better than left because that little bit of lack in length sort of stuck with me. But again, is he a bad player as your fourth pick? He's not. Can he contribute and play in a couple of spots or three spots on the offensive line if you need him to? He can. Is that a bad thing? No, you've loaded the roster to the point where you don't necessarily need him. But, the top strength of that draft is just primo. Like, you got great value. You added to positions of strength in case of the defensive line. They had a very good defensive line rotation last year. They needed more weapons. They went after that with Waddle up high. Obviously, he's already familiar with Tua, so you should have a quicker sort of speed to proficiency there with him getting up to speed in that offense. And then Holland gives them a dynamic threat deep in the third of the field that they could use. That team was in good straits before and just got stronger.
I'm looking right now, and I don't think that they traded down at all, or at least in like the first 4 or 5 picks, which is kind of opposite of your number one team, which constantly traded down with the Carolina Panthers. The Dolphins kind of took the opposite approach and did a whole stick and pick thing. But Carolina, I mean, God, they every single pick they had seemed like it was for sale.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of speculation to your point about Miami, and Miami's going to be the big mover, and Miami has all this capital. They can move up, they can move down, they can, and to your point, they were pretty static. They stayed, said, we see value, we're picking it. The Panthers, on the other hand, didn't. And this is Scott Fitterer, the GM of the Panthers, and I was fascinated. This was a pattern that developed throughout the draft. Now, the Panthers traded 5 times. That's a franchise record for them. It beat the record of 4, which was their previous record. And the whole concept is brought not actually by their GM, but by their owner. So they have a new owner who made a ton of money in business and is applying that filter of continuous improvement to all areas and said, so what's your plan? What's your lens? How do you view this thing? What's your strategy for how you're going to use these assets that the NFL gives us every year in draft picks? And how can we maximize them? And they were like, now we need to take a sort of top-down look at our draft strategy. And this is a strategy that I am personally attached to because I believe in it. Like, I personally believe in my core that the draft is an uncertain exercise. You can reduce a bunch of the uncertainty, but you can't reduce all of it. There is no way to do that. And that means you just need more swings. More swings is better anytime you can get them. And there's a value balance, right? You don't trade a first-round pick and turn it into 5,000 seventh-round picks and say, I got the same value, right? You have to weigh each one. But every time, what the Panthers did throughout the weekend is weigh their board versus the value of trading down. Their bias was trade down. If there's another guy of equal or very close value. I'll take the picks. They did it 5 times. So they started out with 8, 39, 73, 113, 191, 193, and 222. So that's 7 picks. They ended up with 12 total picks, including a 4th rounder that they picked up next year, which is 1 in the 1st, 1 in the 2nd, 2 in the 3rd, 2 in the 4th, 1 this year, 1 next year, 2 in the 5th, 3 in the 6th, and 1 in the 7th. 12 overall picks, so more swings. And they used it with their board, which was my favorite. And this is a strategy I've employed in mock drafts for years. So to actually watch it play out in real life for all the marbles, I was transfixed. After day 2, when really they hung up the "we're open for business" sign, I was fascinated. Every time the Panthers got near to the clock, I was like, what are they going to do? Are they going to do it again? Are they really going to follow the model?
And when you look at the value they got back, it's pretty much equal, if not more so, than what they paid for Sam Darnold. Like, they got Darnold for free, technically. Like, again, it's a little bit of a stretch, but when we listen to the laws of algebra...
Yeah, seriously, you're not kidding. And this is the thing that I've been telling people for years, and it goes against conventional wisdom of, if you're not 100% certain, and so many GMs are, this is my guy, we can't move, there's a shelf after this, we'll lose him. That's the preeminent wisdom. And it's kind of like going for it on 4th down, right? Not punting when you're on the 50-yard line. Like, it's 4th and 2. Like, your outcome's better if you just go for it, right? That was impossible 10 years ago. And the draft is the same way. You're going to see more people follow this model. Now, it has to be successful, but they're going to look and say, damn, they got Darnold for free, right? And they got all these other players. And was it that much worse than if they'd picked at their spot? And the answer is no, it's better.
No.
Because, they just got more chances. And again, you apply a 30% hit rate to 12 picks versus 7 picks, and you get another player or 2, right? That's a big deal in the NFL. So anyways, the Panthers, fascinating throughout from the get-go. Now, they stuck at 8. They picked J.C. Horn, and again, that was the first sort of like, whoa, pick. Like, that wasn't chalk. A lot of people said they were going to go for a quarterback, whatever else. Like, they say J.C. Horn, number 1 defensive matchup weapon. He's going to allow us to do things in our division where we just lock him up on a guy. It doesn't matter whether it's a slot receiver, an outside receiver, a tight end, and say, that guy's gone from the game plan, and we can take our other defensive weapons, which we drafted all defense last year, and just move them around to compensate because we know JC is going to basically erase a guy. So they stick and pick at 8. After that, they hang up the "we're open" sign, and they trade back 5 times in their next, what would have been 7 picks. Round 2, they get one of my favorite players in the entire draft, Terrace Marshall Jr. out of LSU. I think he is legitimately a guy who could ascend to be a number 1 within 2 or 3 years. Mm-hmm. Tremendously valuable vertical skill set, but he's more than that. He's fast. He's got great hands. He's tall, got a great frame. Just a very complete wide receiver that I think was overshadowed by Jamar Chase pretty heavily, but was a good receiver. They get him at 59. That's a crazy value, and adds, again, when we're talking about Jared Goff in Detroit, right? Give Sam Darnold as many weapons as you can give him. Give him more weapons than he's ever had. Give him some decent protection, and if that falls apart, it's on Darnold, and we can go get a quarterback next year. To that point, round 3, pick 70, Brady Christensen, one of my favorite outside zone tackles in the entire draft. They pick him up to go probably opposite Taylor Moton, who's a very solid right tackle for them. Round 3, with one of those extra picks, Tommy Tremble, the TEH back out of Notre Dame, one of the best blocking players in the entire draft, no matter what the position.
At any position, yeah.
Yeah, just somebody said he'll melt your face mask. I think that might have been Greg Cassell, who said the guy will just melt your face mask. He's going to get up in your business and push you out of the way. That's his gig. But he's also tremendously athletic and was used, I would say, in a limited way in a receiving role there, but he's got more capacity than he showed at Notre Dame there. So a really interesting matchup weapon for the Panthers there. Round 4, pick 126. I don't know if you heard this. So Matt Rule's wife was lobbying for Chuba Hubbard as the pick.
Really?
Yep.
Because Chuba tore them up when he was at Baylor? So she's like, hey, go get the guy that kicked your ass.
Yeah, 2 years ago,
that's
that guy that
hilarious.
freaking torched us, she's texting her husband going, he's still there. You can get him. That guy's amazing. He floored us, right?
Oh, that's so funny.
That's great.
love
So
it.
anyways, Chuba Hubbard, one of the best pass blocking RBs in this draft. You talked about a best backfield protector for Miami. Chuba is one of the guys. There's like 3 different levels of blocking running backs. One is I can get in the way, right? I'll dive at his legs. I'm a cut blocker. I just need to distract this guy or make him hop for long enough that my quarterback sees that I've gone down and knows to get rid of the ball. It's almost like a flare going off, right? That's the flare protector. Then there's the protector that's pretty good helping out, right? You give me a chip with a tight end. You give me some help on an offensive tackle. I go stand next to the guard and pick up the inside stunt. Like, I'm pretty good as long as I have help. And then there's the pure, oh, I've got a guy coming off the edge, like unaccounted for linebacking blitzer, and I'm it, and I have to set up in space with technique and pass protect. That's the sort of elite, right? That was guys like Ezekiel Elliott at
Javonte
Ohio
Williams,
State.
too.
That was no problem. I got it. I've got good form. I've got good technique. I've got good power. I'm going to use leverage, and I'm going to hold this guy for a couple of seconds on my own. Like, I'm not just going to like dive at his ankles. I'm going to make sure this guy doesn't get anywhere. Chuba Hubbard is that guy in this draft. He is very good. I think offensive linemen could take pointers from his pass set and protection. He drops his butt, he gets his hands up, he keeps his back square, he moves his feet throughout the rep, mirrors, pushes, locks out when he can. Like, he's a very good blocker. Has the ability to hit the outside zone running lanes. Hello, Brady Christensen. Has the speed to make those cuts hurt when he does. I have a little question about his decision-making ability, sometimes more inside than outside. But again, round 4, pick 126, you're getting a talented athlete that's not going to get your quarterback killed as an RB2. Look, he's not taking CMC's job anytime soon. But I think he could be because of that blocking RB2.
But at least for once, Christian won't have to play every single freaking snap.
For sure.
I mean, good
You
Lord.
have a legitimate backup. Like,
Yes,
that is
for
not
once.
going to get Darnold killed because Darnold, not the most mobile guy, has mobility, but not the most mobile guy. And that's the major roadblock to rookie running backs playing time is, are you going to get our most valuable asset smeared all over the field? If so, you don't get on the field. If you can pass protect on day one, like, you've got a path to playing time. Then they just start adding value. This is where they stack picks. They push all these picks back. They get Davion Nixon, DT out of Iowa, big power guy, upfield power rusher, pretty much one move, one path, which is forward, and I'm going to push you out of the way. Can crush the pocket when he puts his rushes together. Really interesting addition in rotation with Derek Brown, Bravion Roy, Daquan Jones, PJ Johnson, and a guy we're going to talk about, Phil Hoskins, one of my favorite late picks. Keith Taylor, cornerback out of Washington, who we both thought was undervalued. They apparently thought so too. They picked him at 166. I saw Keith Taylor way down in the 200s in a lot of boards. He had more value than that. Round 6, 193. This is a story we need to find out more about. Deontay Brown, the guard from Alabama. There were people saying he was going to get picked in the 3rd. We're in the 6th now, folks. Pick 200. And he's just a massive guard, and he could have gone 3 rounds earlier. It's great value, but there's something that made him drop at least a couple of rounds.
I think it was, like, again, this is going to be, sounds bad to say. I think it was weight. I think a lot of teams had questioned. It was the same thing with Tyler Shelvin at LSU.
For sure.
Can he play under 3? And he checked in at camp at 343, but he was 365 at Bama.
Yeah, he was.
He moved like he was 365. Yeah, he's still big, but I think a lot of teams question. It's like, we can get him there, but will he stay there? And we'll see.
Yeah, they get a great value in round 6, 193. And then another guy that I love that didn't get talked about enough. I tried to talk about him as often as I could in the lead up, which is Shi Smith out of South Carolina. This is a guy that does his job. The job title is wide receiver, right? And he plays largely out of the slot. This is a guy that runs accurate routes, is tough, is accurate. And you might say, wait, you say he's a wide receiver, not a quarterback. I mean, he is accurate in his route running. He is going to be where he is supposed to be when he is supposed to be there. And quarterbacks love guys like that. Very solid hands, physical enough to take a hit over the middle. Is he a huge yak guy? He's not. That's why he went in the 6th, not in the 4th or the 3rd. But I can sneaky see him being that very solid wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 for them that just always makes plays. He's going to remind Darnold a lot of Jamison Crowder, right? He's a guy with a similar skill set, maybe not quite as physically talented, but is going to be like a clock. He's going to be on time, where he's supposed to be, when he's supposed to be. He's going to catch the ball. And quarterbacks love those guys. Again, you've got a bunch of extra picks in the 6th. Go get a long snapper. Go get one of the top specialists in the draft. Get Thomas Fletcher out of Alabama. Extra swings. Who cares? We can grab a specialist and we don't have to wait and try and get him in the UDFA scramble. We like that guy. We need one. We're going to secure him. Doesn't hurt when you have 12 picks to go get a long snapper. And then the guy I mentioned earlier, Phil Hoskins, DT out of Kentucky. I made notes about him in 2019. He made a bunch of plays when I was watching other players versus Kentucky. And I love this pick, like capital LOVE, love this pick. Round 7 pick 232, what a lot of people would consider a throwaway. Hoskins is a massive human being. He's like 6'5", 319. Flashed on tape for me. Excellent addition. Just another solid developmental player, rotational player. We're seeing this on defense, especially with the really big guys. Don't leave them in there for 50, 60, 70 snaps. Have them in there for 35, 40 snaps a game. Have another couple of guys that can come in for their 35 or 40 snaps. Everybody stays fresher. Yes, it means we need to put an extra roster spot into the DTs, but it also means we have big guys who still have fresh legs late in the game. And Hoskins was a guy that I didn't catch the Panthers picking him in the flurry of the 7th. And I was like, did he go UDFA? And I was like, no, he got picked. He went to the Panthers, where, again, he's got all these talented defensive linemen I named earlier, and he just fits into that rotation, doesn't have any pressure to perform. I bet he makes this team. He's a talented guy that had good reps in the SEC.
My biggest takeaway from this Panthers class: loose lips sink ships. You know why I say that, EJ?
No. I mean, I know the reference, but I don't know why you say it in reference to this class.
The Saints have a leak, EJ.
Oh, do they?
Carolina got word the Saints were trying to trade up for J.C. Horn. They took J.C. Horn. They pick at 59. Saints pick at 60. They were going to take Brady Christensen. They got word the Saints were going to take Terrace Marshall, and they said, oh, no, we're not going to allow that. We're going to take Terrace Marshall at 59 and hope that Brady Christensen gets there to 70. And he did.
And they get lucky. Yep.
That's why when San Francisco had 0 leaks even though everybody thought they were going to take Mac Jones, they never corrected anything. They never said anything. No leaks come out of that front office, because if there's a leak, somebody can take your player. That's what happened in New Orleans. Now, I love Pete Werner as a linebacker, but they wanted Terrace Marshall. And now they're going to play against Terrace Marshall.
And I would take Terrace Marshall over Pete Werner. No offense, Pete. Terrace Marshall is a dynamic guy. And if, again, Pete Werner might have a better career. You never know in the draft. He could be a solid 10-year guy. But if Terrace Marshall hits his ceiling, it's higher than Pete Werner's. That's it. When you're picking guys that high in the draft, you're looking at guys that, if everything goes right and they develop correctly, what's their max? What's the most they could help us? And Terrace Marshall's ceiling, I could say with confidence, is higher than Pete Werner's. Now, does that mean he's going to be a better NFL player? We don't know that. There's so many variables. But when you're picking, that's what you have to go on. And I love the gamble, right? Because it worked, right? And there's plenty of gambles in a draft that don't work out. But it's like, oh, we really want Christensen. And there had started to be a run on tackles by then. So it is a risk, right? We might lose that player. But we're not going to let him go to someplace we might see him more often than we want to. So we're going to... It's kind of a double negative for the Saints, right? Not only did you not get him, but we did.
And that's actually a pretty decent segue there. Look at us, EJ. We're almost professional at this. For our last segment before we get into Matt Bowen's interview, which is rookies that are worth drafting in fantasy football this year out of these teams that we just went over, specifically in best ball formats, which is a little bit different. Remember, you're not having to pick starters every single week, so you don't get screwed by injuries, you don't get screwed by, game script. It's just, if you're really good at drafting, whoever on your roster gets the most points from week to week, you're going to get credit for that. So it's a much more, I guess you could say, fair format for fantasy football, which is why it's becoming a lot more popular every single year, because it's a lot more fun to just be good at drafting and not get screwed over. And so we've been partnering with Underdog Fantasy basically this whole summer because they want to spread the gospel of best ball fantasy football, and EJ and I both love that format, so we are more than happy to do that with Underdog. Remember, if you use the link at the description below, use promo code Brett, that'll get you $25 in cash to use on the platform, which conveniently is the same amount for for an entry into their $3.5 million best ball tournament, $1 million to first prize. So keep that in mind when we're talking about these guys, because rookies might make or break a lot of those teams that could potentially win the $1 million. So pay attention here, because Terrace Marshall was EJ's first pick for this. And before EJ goes off, I want to bring one thing up here, and I'm sorry for the podcast listeners, but if you're watching on YouTube, this is going to be much better for you guys since there's a visual aid.
Oh no, you brought visual aids?
I brought visual aids, EJ.
Oh,
this
boy.
is the 2019 LSU install under Joe Brady. This is Joe Brady's playbook from when he was, again, I'm sharing it on screen for people that are just listening in podcast format. This is Joe Brady's playbook from when he was Terrace Marshall's offensive coordinator at LSU in Joe Burrow's Heisman season. Joe Brady is now going to be his offensive coordinator again at Carolina. And this play right here was their go-to in high red zone and pretty much to 40 yards. Marshall played this spot right here, which is Z receiver. They would, anytime they were on a hash, they would pretty much dial this up. It looks very similar to like middle read from a Bruce Arians playbook because of this little middle read here. And so they run this on a hash. You go trips to the field. And this Z receiver here, which is Marshall's spot, he's the widest receiver to the trip side to the field. They call this the number one strong. This almost never gets thrown. It's a very, I don't want to say unreliable. It's a low percentage throw because it's a vertical route from the far hash, which in itself it's got to go a long way to get there. It's a low percentage ball. Unless you have a receiver like Terrace Marshall, who led all of college football in contested catch rate and turns a 50-50 from the far hash into an 80-20. Literally, I'm not kidding. It was over 80% contested catch rate. That's going to be his role. Anytime the Panthers get from like the 40-yard line into high red zone, they are calling this play, they are throwing it to Terrace Marshall, and he is going to score a shitload. I know he's a rookie. You have to get him on your best ball roster because every now and then he's going to pop off for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns just from this play, and that might win you $1 million. What say you, EJ?
Well, first things first, I'm not shocked. If anybody else had pulled that out, I might have been a little bit surprised at least. That I've known you long enough that I'm like, no, I'm not surprised at all. Best ball is an amazing format. I don't know this about you, so I have to ask, are you a golfer? Have you ever golfed?
I'm a terrible golfer, but if that counts,
that's
then
most
yes.
of us, right? I haven't golfed in a long time, and I wasn't ever great. I was proficient at one point. But if you've ever played in a golf tournament, best ball's the thing, right? 4 of you line up on the tee, y'all hit a ball, and then you go, I like John's. Like, John's is out there in the middle of the fairway, and mine's over there in the woods. I'm just going to go pick that up, and we're all going to hit off John's. And then you do the same thing on the next shot. It's a much more enjoyable format for golf because you don't have to be penalized for all your terrible choices. Much like best ball and fantasy, you just get the best of your choices. And we've all had that where, yeah, I would have won if that guy that had 230 yards and 2 scores wasn't on my bench. Now you just get credit for it automatically. So best ball, a great format in golf, great format in fantasy as well. Terrace Marshall, again, he's got the Joe Brady familiarity. And to a point, Sam Darnold can throw that ball. right? Robbie Anderson, who now is in Carolina and he's reunited with, is going to be playing that receiver on the other side of the field, right? The tight side of the field. And DJ Moore is going to be the guy in the slot that's coming up over the cross, right? And Marshall's going to be out there. And again, he's a rookie. He's largely going to be one-on-one. They're not going to double Marshall. Not until he starts scoring, right?
lot.
Maybe not even then. Because, again, he's a rookie, and you got to be reasonable about your expectations. But Darnold can throw that ball, and he is, Marshall is familiar with Brady's offense. He's going to be up to speed faster than a lot of wide receivers are, even though the playbook is more complicated and has more options in the pros. So, is he going to be your scoring leader? No. He is absolutely not going to be your scoring leader. Does he have the potential out of these classes to put some points on your board? Yep. Are you going to get credit for those points? Do you have to pick the right week to get him lined up and say, I think Darnold hits him this week, which is, could be your allure, but it doesn't have to be anymore because you got best ball. Is he going to get you some points? He is. Is he going to score this year? He is. He's just too dynamic and talented. So he's my number one pick. Who's your number one pick?
So my number one is kind of in the same vein, and that's Michael Carter from the Jets. And he's not somebody who's going to get 20 touches a game. He might get 12 to 15. But behind that offensive line, where you're running outside zone with Mekhi Becton, you're running it with AVT, every once in a while, those two are going to absolutely create a canyon. And Michael Carter has the kind of explosive speed where if you give him a canyon 2 or 3 times a game, he's going to turn that into 60 or 70 yards by itself because he's that explosive. And he might even score a couple times off that too. So do I expect him to get consistently 20-plus points a game? Absolutely not. But there's going to be a couple games where he's getting 25 to 30 on like 8 total runs. And I'm going to get those points. Michael Carter is a guy, and I was talking to Josh Norris about this, who also works with Underdog. And when I was doing because you and I, fun fact, even though we're sponsored by Underdog, you and I are eligible for this contest. And I was drafting.
We need to tell everybody
Josh
about that because we assumed, especially when we signed with Underdog, we're like, well, that's an amazing contest, right? $3.5 million worth of prize money. That's amazing by itself. $1 million first prize. Okay, that's nuts. Cool. We'll never win it. And they were like, what? We were like, well, we work for you now. You sponsors. We're not eligible, right? That's the fine print at the bottom of the contest. They're like, no, you can win it. And we'd actually be really psyched if you did. And we're like, wait, what? We can enter? They're like, no, we need you to enter. We need you to enter like a bunch. And we were like, okay. So we just found this out like 2 days ago that we can actually enter. They want us to enter. We're going to encourage you guys to enter, and you're going to get to draft with us. But we could win $1 million, which is kind of crazy.
And if EJ, and I'm going to commit right now, if EJ or I win this $1 million, we're going to set up like a bootleg retreat. We're going to rent out a bar wherever the next Super Bowl is. All the bootleggers are going to come drink with us. Everything's going to be free.
You know where the Super Bowl is this year.
It's an hour away from my house. If anybody's in the Southern California area, if I win this $1 million, we're renting out a bar in LA and we're gonna have fun. Again, it's possible. It's possible. Just saying, if I get Michael Carter on my team.
If you get Michael Carter, and the other thing about Michael Carter that's super fun is he's probably gonna score at least once this year on chip and leak.
Oh yeah.
Because they're going to line up a linebacker on him, and he's gonna stay in, right? And the linebacker's going to relax and set his eyes off to, okay, who are the crossers, right? He's going to be like, no, he's blocking. And Michael Carter's going to go, bam, squirt, out to the flat, and the linebacker's not going to be able to keep with him. Again, there's a few linebackers in the league that can cover that, and they have to be on it. They have to be vigilant. I mean, like hawk-like, basically spying the running back instead of spying the quarterback. And some will, but some won't. They'll see him block. They'll turn their head for a second, and he's going to have 2 steps to the outside. And if you think you can catch Carter with 2 steps to the outside, if Darnold throws him a half-decent screen, the answer is no.
Yeah, good luck with that. Yeah. Legit 4.4, if not 4.3 speed.
Yeah,
like watch his highlights.
And quick
folks.
too.
It's fun. Oh, it's so quick. Who's your number one?
My number one, Amon-Ra St. Brown. We talked about this a little bit in the UDFA episode and building up. And again, these are our favorite picks out of these classes, not the favorite picks out of the whole draft. We'll talk about those as we go through our divisional preview. Each week we'll be talking about players that you could add or have a high likelihood of scoring well because of their situation. The reason I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, I sort of mistakenly said I thought he was going to be wide receiver 3. He might ascend to that role because of the role he plays, but literally the Vikings, the Lions have 3 legitimate veteran starters they brought in. One in Quintez Cephas, who was on the roster, and 2 guys in free agency that probably will start ahead of him. So that puts him up as wide receiver 4. But guess what? Jared Goff is very familiar with 4 wide receiver sets coming from LA, and they're definitely going to use some in the offense. The other thing is the Lions are most likely going to be behind. We like what they're building, but their talent level is not where they're going to be contending for the division, most likely, or really probably more than 8 wins, even though there's now 17 games. Now, if they do more than that, they're exceeding expectations. So that means they're going to be coming from behind. That means they're going to open up Jared Goff and say, air it out. And that means 3 or 4 wide receivers. So that means more chances for a guy like St. Brown. And he's got a skill set that works inside, that works outside. They're going to be able to run him in trips. He is very tenacious in his receiving. He is not a guy that lets a lot of balls go by him. And he's not a guy that goes down easily after he gets the ball. And does that mean, again, that he's going to be your number 1 scoring option? I sure hope not. If you're doing that, you're doing it wrong. But is he going to produce some points this year? Just from yards in, blowouts when Jared Goff's whipping it and they're trying to catch up in the 3rd or 4th quarter? Yeah, he's going to get yards. Is he going to score a lot? Can't guarantee it. It'll depend on how Dan Campbell and his staff call the offense when they get in the red zone. But is he going to be involved? Maybe more than some of these other offensive threats on the teams that I mentioned. So between Marshall and Brown, you're going to get some points. Are you drafting them up high? No, that's probably not the best strategy, but you're going to take late round flyers on these guys. And again, you get their points whether or not you choose to, quote unquote, activate them, because you don't have to activate them. You get all the points off your roster every week.
Plus, he's only 1 injury away from seeing every single snap.
That's kind of my point, is any of these guys, and one of the guys ahead of him is Brashad Perriman, and Perriman's career has stabilized, but he was plagued by injuries for the first 3-4 years in the league, almost washed out because of it. Now, he seems to have sort of hit his stride and put most of that behind him, but, there's no telling that one of the other guys doesn't. The NFL is a very rough league. We have an extra game this year, so it's just more wear and tear. And again, they're going to be trying to throw from behind. So Amon-Ra St. Brown could eventually be seeing wide receiver 3 reps regularly at some point in the season. And Goff spreads the ball around. He's not a guy that typically plays favorites. So is he going to be a ton? No, because the ball gets spread around. But is he going to get some? He is.
I would say my number 1 is a similar type situation where it's ball's going to get spread around a lot because Tua Tagovailoa plays, quarterback like a point guard. It's very much get the ball, get it out. But Jalen Waddle is my other rookie that I'm targeting heavily in best ball, because when he gets the ball in his hand, he doesn't need 10 catches to score. He needs 1. He could have a stat line that's very much like Deshaun Jackson, where it's 2 catches, 90 yards, 2 touchdowns. Like that's a feasible stat. Like watch his Auburn game when he was a freshman year, I think it was, where he got barely any touches and he got 4 touchdowns against Auburn in the Iron Bowl. Like, are you kidding me? Like, he's that kind of dynamic threat. And I know that Will Fuller is there, but good luck to him to stay healthy. I love Will Fuller, but durability's never been his thing. You got Devontae Parker, who's a different kind of receiver that plays a different kind of role. Lynn Bowden is, I don't even know what the hell Lynn Bowden's going to be for them, to be perfectly honest.
Wild card. We'll just say he's a wild card.
Preston Williams has never really been a picture of health. Jakeem Grant is probably his only competition for that role as a true slot receiver, but let's be real, Jalen Waddle will beat him out. As much as I like Jakeem Grant, he's not as explosive as Jalen Waddle. Again, as I said earlier, only Tyreek Hill is. Like, we're talking about that caliber of burst here. Not to mention he already has familiarity with Tua. Like, you put him in the slot and say, go get open in under 2 seconds and Tua will get it to you. He'll get open in under 2 seconds. That's why they took him at 6 overall. So I know it's not the most off the wall pick to say go draft Jalen Waddle, but please go draft Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, of the four guys we mentioned, if you've got a shot at Waddle up high, he's the guy to take up high. These other guys are, Carter, I would say, is closer to middle or 2/3 of the way down, along with Terrace Marshall in that same sort of vein, and then St. Brown a little bit lower. But Jalen Waddle's like a legit guy that's going to put up both yards and points. And if they decide to toss him in there on special teams because he is an effective guy in that role, maybe you don't want to be exposing the number 6 overall pick to those kind of hits, but a couple times. And again, he doesn't need 55 returns to come up with a couple of long ones and maybe a score. He needs like 8.
Yeah. Just look at that Auburn game.
Yeah.
I swear to God. Like, that's all you need to watch is that one game. That tells you all you need to know about Jalen Waddle. He's an absolute monster in every sense of the word. So that was a fun segment. I really enjoyed that. I hope you guys did too. Why don't we get into a remarkable interview that we had with both yours and mine, one of our personal heroes, and that is Matt Bowen. Still can't believe that I'm saying those words, that he came on the Bootleg Football Podcast, but we got freaking Matt Bowen because EJ's tenacious and was able to get him on this show. It was a great interview. Can't wait for you guys to listen to it. We'll see you back on the other side. Super excited to be joined now by one of my favorite film gurus in all of football media, and I could speak for EJ on that as well. Matt Bowen played DB for 7 years in the league, DB coach by trade, in addition to seemingly being on every single podcast known to mankind these days, talking about the aftermath of the NFL draft. Couldn't be happier to have you on. Thank you for being here.
I'm glad to be here, guys.
So first things first, I kind of wanted to get into nitty gritty scheme fits, because it's easy to say like, oh, okay, I like Pat Surtain, I like J.C. Horn, like everybody loves those guys. But who would you say specifically out of this DB class are your favorite scheme fits, like skill set to system? Can be any round, any player really, but who were the guys where when they went off the board you looked at and was like, man, he's going to be really successful in that defense?
Well, I think the first one is Greg Newsome, corner out of Northwestern, went to Cleveland, right? You look at Newsome and what he is as a corner, I would say he's got a versatile skill set, right? He can play man or zone. We've seen him in off-man coverage. We've seen him in press man. He can create, I use the term on-the-ball production, guys. Because look, everyone wants to get interceptions. I wanted to get interceptions too. I had 4 in 7 years. Okay, those things are hard to get. They are hard to get. Okay, but what you want at the quarterback position is someone who drives in the football, can make plays in the football, and especially as a defensive back coach in high school, if you make a play in the football, you get a pass broken up, we call it a PBU. That's a big time play. Okay, especially if you're looking at game situations inside the red zone, third down situation. And Newsome is around the football. Okay, and people that are around the football doesn't happen by accident. It happens for a couple reasons in the secondary. Your football awareness, your instincts, your understanding wide receiver splits, formation, and alignment, down and distance game situation, where routes are going to break. And I always say this. I was taught this a long time ago by Steve Jackson, my defensive back coach in Washington under Greg Williams, our defense coordinator, that outside of the quick game, so, a slant, a hitch, a smoke route, every route breaks between 12 and 15 yards in the NFL, pretty much. Double move is about 8 yards. Okay, so 12 to 15 yards, you're preparing for the wide receiver to break, whether you're in press, snugged up to the hip, or you're playing off man trying to keep your cushion. Now, if they get past 15 yards, you better turn and run, right? Because they're not going to stop. They're going to try to take you down the field. But Newsome is excellent at that. Now go to the scheme in Cleveland. Very split safety heavy. And guys, I'll tell you right now, I think that's where the league is going. Because the NFL is so pass heavy right now. You're seeing more quarters. You're seeing more cover 2. You're seeing cover 6, which is quarter, half. So trying to limit explosive plays. You're going to give up some plays. You play Patrick Mahomes, you play Rodgers, you play Josh Allen, you're going to give up some plays. But can you limit the big plays down the field? And I think that's why you're seeing more split safety. You get that in Cleveland. You get some cover 3, which is 3 deep coverage. You also get your man. So if you're looking at a corner who's got versatile traits, will drive in the football, will create on-the-ball production, can play press and off, and also tackle in the run game. That one jumped out to me immediately, Greg Newsome, in terms of the skill set and the ideal scheme fit. Now, you mentioned J.C. Horn and Surtain. I'll go back to J.C. Horn. Now, Carolina was one of the most zone-heavy teams in the NFL last year. Okay, so you draft a man corner in the top 10. J.C. Horn, to me, has some of the most competitive coverage traits I've studied on film in quite some time. He will battle. He can play outside, he can play in the slot. He's got a long frame. He's physical. He's a willing tackler. And that's the thing. If you're a DB coach and a guy is willing to tackle, hey, you can work with that. You can work on tackling technique. You can work on angles. But the willingness there from J.C. Horn to be a physical tackler, I do see it on film. They said, why would they draft a zone, in a zone-heavy defense? Why would they draft a man corner? Well, I do think the man reps will increase. But also, if you look at the NFL film today, teams, especially versus 3-by-1 sets, so you have your X receiver into the boundary, you got trips to the field. What teams are doing now is they'll play quarters to the field. They'll lock that backside corner. So it's basically you're playing man technique within zone. We saw it a bunch last year in L.A. with Jalen Ramsey and Brandon Staley's defense. They would go quarters to the field, lock Jalen Ramsey. What that now gives you is flexibility in your defense. So if I'm a safety into the boundary, now I can go look for work. I know J.C. Horn has got him locked down. Now I'm going to help there if the quarterback looks here. Of course I am. My eyes are immediately and go to the trip side. Can I steal number 3 vertical? Can I steal a crosser? Now you get an extra body in terms of your coverage. So I do think you'll see that with Carolina in addition to an increase in man reps. And Patrick Surtain, I thought Surtain was the best corner in this class. I really believe that. Just in terms of his physical play style, his coverage traits. He's the prototype of the position, what you look for right now. He's 6 foot plus. He's got great testing times, explosive traits based on his testing time and his tape. Can play the ball down the field, will tackle, will set an edge in a run game. That really fits with Vic Fangio, what he wants in his corners. Now, they are split safety heavy again, but like we just talked about with playing quarters lock, and even to the field, think about it. You're playing quarters to the field. Number 1 releases vertical. It's basically a man matchup in quarters. That's all it is.
Yeah.
Playing from offense. And look, you can press in quarters too. So I like those fits obviously as well. But those top 3 corners, I love their tape. They all have the ability to play man. I think that's what everyone wants. Even though we are seeing more zone-heavy defenses in the NFL, if you're 3rd and 2 to 6, if you're inside the low red zone, which I call the plus 10-yard line and in, you want to play man coverage. You want to challenge people. You want to disrupt people. And you want people that are tone setters in your secondary. I'll mention one more. Elijah Molden, who I really liked on his Washington film.
Ooh, yeah.
Okay, and Elijah Molden, is he a true slot corner? Probably not. Is he a true safety? Maybe. I mean, is he a hybrid slot, like a slot safety, I would call it. And I just totally made that word up, okay? So it's not probably a real word.
We got it.
But, I want to coach guys like that, right? I want Elijah Molden in my secondary. He is a tone setter. He's a tone setter. Highly instinctual. He's got ball skills. Understands how to defeat blocks, whether going over the top or sliding around the back to get in on a run play. Is a strong tackler in the open field. Has incredible forward ability. Okay, when I look forward to tape with guys who play underneath, do they have forward ability? When the ball's thrown, can they explode out of their break with speed and take a proper angle and cut off the ball? I think he's a really versatile player that you can scheme up in your pressure schemes, have an instant impact in your sub packages. And you look at Tennessee, not as much last year as 2 years ago, but I think they're going to get back to it. They use so much late movement in disguise. They show single high, they spin it too deep. They show too deep. Quarterback comes to the line of scrimmage, all of a sudden it's pressure. Guys are flying from everywhere. He has that ability to play multiple roles when you spin the secondary late.
Yeah, he was the guy that I looked at where it's like, okay, Tennessee runs more creepers than basically everybody else in the league, and they love to bring the nickel.
Yes.
So you better get a nickel that is explosive, but more importantly, if he's coming free off the edge because they call the wrong protection, it's one thing to get a DB one-on-one with a 240-pound quarterback. It's another thing to actually get him on the ground, and that dude can tackle. Like you said, tackling is important.
Yeah, and how many times have we seen Mahomes or Rodgers, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen beat a free rusher off the edge, right?
Yeah.
It happens all the time because they're elite players at the position. So can you be that guy that can take the proper angle, attack the upfield shoulder of the quarterback, and get him on the ground? He's shown he can do that. Again, I wrote this piece for ESPN. It was like a draft superlatives piece. And I basically, with Molden, I said, this is a guy I would love to coach. Because I've always believed this from secondary play. When you turn on the film, if you're a wide receiver and you put stuff on film that tells them that we are going to dictate the tempo of this game, that has impact. It has impact. We need the guys in the secondary. And I was trying to think of a comp for Elijah Molden. The closest one I can get to, and maybe they're not the same player, but in terms of play style, was Buda Baker. I always look for safeties that are urgent, that show urgency to the football. And you get that a lot with Molden.
Yeah, Molden was one of our favorites from the point that he plays around the line, and he's good at that. There's a lot of guys that play around the line, but he's good going forward. As you said, he's good against the run. He's willing to stick it in there. He'll make impact when he does that against the run or the pass. He's a guy that, not an elite tester, not an elite size, not elite length, but like something you said earlier that I just loved was guys around the ball aren't there by accident.
Yes.
Right. They're there because they study. They're there because they know what's going on. And in his case, he combines those two things, and the speed doesn't matter as much. He's got enough speed in that condensed short area. He knows where it's going. He'll get there and he'll make impact when he does. And that's a valuable player in a league that is base nickel and goes dime. You need 3-4 DBs up against the line, and they have to go forward and back. And Molden fits that. And I saw so many people say, well, he doesn't have deep speed. He's not going to need deep speed on most of his reps, right? That's not where he's going to make his money. So, and the other three guys, the top three guys, it's funny because we talked about all three of those guys at the top of this podcast as we were talking about some of our favorite draft fits. And, Horns tackling, Newsome's sort of aggressiveness and that alpha mentality to go with the skill set, right? He doesn't care if he's manned up. He wants to be manned up because he believes he is the best corner. He believed he was the best corner in the draft. He said so repeatedly. And, you want to see that from a guy that, again, you're going to leave one-on-one in essentially a man matchup and say, go get him, champ. And he's like, yep, that's what I'm here for. So
you bring up a great point about Molden too, because guys that don't have elite testing numbers and don't have elite height, weight, and speed, that's where they're drafted. They're drafted in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. The great thing about the NFL, none of that matters anymore once you're in camp. No one cares what your 40 time is anymore. No, it doesn't matter. Can you play or not? Can you fit in the scheme? Can you produce? Can you be alignment and assignment sound as a rookie? So I can trust you to put you on the field in critical game situations. You do those things. Now it's just about playing football and game reps, getting used to NFL speed. And they'll go through that transition process. This year you're going to have training camp. You're going to have preseason football games. So those are all positives for this rookie class. I remember when I was a rookie in St. Louis, you talk about a teaching tool. I went against the greatest show on turf every day, twice a day. I was back. We had 2 days. We traveled. We went to Western Illinois, University of Macomb. And look, it's hot everywhere in the summer. So you're going 2 a day practices, and I'm trying to stay in the deep half over the top of Isaac Bruce and Torrey Holt, getting taught life lessons every day in that football. But you need that stuff, right? You need that stuff as a rookie, and those guys will have that this year.
You made a point earlier about split safety coverages becoming more and more normal in the NFL, and I think it probably started a few years ago with Vic Fangio when he had that defense in Chicago rocking and rolling. You had Eddie Jackson, and they could play quarters and be totally confident that if like number 2 ran a bender and took off, Eddie Jackson could still cover it, without getting pantsed on national television. And now we're seeing, Sean Desai is going to play that same defense again in Chicago this year. Staley's going to play it in LA with the Chargers. They played it last year with the Rams. I'm assuming the Rams are going to play a similar defense again this year. So it's kind of proliferating around the NFL, whereas for a long time, everybody wanted to run cover 3 because that's what the Legion of Boom did, and that worked, and it was simple, and it let guys play fast. But I think as defenses went more towards the spread and they started to take advantage of single high looks with deep crossers and, taking advantage of double seams and everything like that, now we're starting to see more too high. And something that I found interesting, and it was one of my favorite picks of the whole draft, was when the Chargers took Asante Samuel, because I think Brandon Staley looked at Asante Samuel and was like, that's my Kyle Fuller. That's my field side corner that can play from outside leverage, completely ignore divider rules, but still not get beat inside. And there's like two guys in this whole class that I think can do that, where you throw leverage out the window every single play. It's like you're playing outside. Everything outside the numbers is yours. You have a safety inside in Derwin James who's rangy enough to protect you. And I was kind of putting that secondary together in my head with Asante and Derwin and Adderley. And I look at what they're building there, and it reminds me a lot of what Vic Fangio had in Chicago in 2018. Would you be able to talk about your thoughts on the secondary in the Chargers and kind of the defense that they're building there, and how good do you think they can be?
I think they could be excellent. Going back to your point on Vic Fangio, I think everyone remembers that Sunday night game in 2018, Bears and Rams, at Soldier Field, where Vic Fangio's defense basically erased Sean McVay's offense that night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ability to pressure out of five-man fronts, the scheme pressure, but also what they did in the secondary, and they played quarters. And you brought up a great point about crossing routes. You know, I said earlier that you play split safety to limit explosive plays. Sure, you do, because you can have safeties basically bracket deep routes down the field if you get an inside vertical. But more importantly, the ability to take away those crossers, and that comes back to that off safety. You know, if you can press outside with your corner and you can lock number one, now it frees up your safety. Now you're waiting for that crosser to come across the field. Just like you see Kansas City is a perfect model for that, because they run 3-by-1 trips. They'll take Kelsey backside to occupy that corner. And what they're trying to do is get Tyreek Hill loose on that deep over route. Okay, now you have a safety trying to top it. That's a really tough responsibility. But guess what? When you lock that backside corner, you're playing split safety. Now that off safety can walk down and wait for the over route. And that's what they did that game. They were waiting for Robert Woods. They were trusting Amukamura and Fuller to play over the top, and they're using those safeties almost like double rover out of quarters. It was excellent schematics, excellent football. With Brandon Staley, you saw it last year. The way they used Fuller and John Johnson in the secondary, the same way, and how they played their corners outside. Like we talked earlier, Ramsey would be the guy who would lock to the boundary. Saw that multiple times they played Seattle against DK Metcalf. But I do like Asante Samuel. I thought Asante Samuel could be a late one. I really did. I thought it could be a late one because of his transition speed, because of his physicality, his toughness. And look, I thought some teams might look at him as a nickel corner because he's got lateral ability. And he will tackle. Look, to play the nickel, I think it's one of the toughest spots in the NFL for a couple of reasons. One, like you talked about earlier, you got to be able to blitz. You have to be able to play a two-way go, so you don't have the boundary to protect you anymore, right? You talk about divider rules outside. You're playing outside leverage. You get an inside release. You got to pedal. You got to weave. You got to stay on top. You got to keep your cushion. And then you got to be able to transition to the football. The key there is Derwin James. If Derwin James is healthy, he's one of the most dominant defensive players in this league. It's as simple as that. He's a dominant defensive player that can play off-man coverage, can play press, can pedal and weave in a split safety alignment, can drop the hook to curl and cover three, can pressure, can cut off the ball in the run game. And we talk about 5-tool players in baseball all the time, right? That's a 5-tool player in the secondary in Derwin James. He is an impact player. The thing is, it's just his health. If he can stay healthy under Brandon Staley's coaching, watch out, because they got pass rushers too. That's the thing. Yeah. They have pass rushers too.
Yeah, that's going to
defense that can be set up like Fangio's defense was in 2018.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see how direct that translation is. We've been talking about it for most of the offseason. The Samuel pick was one that we both kind of looked at each other because I had compared Samuel's style to Fuller's style and that he loves to keep things in front and break downhill. Right. I thought that, like you did, that he was more of a nickel because he was smart enough to do it. You see the anticipation on film, on tape. You saw him set guys up. I forget which game that was, Brett, but we both watched it. He creeps in, sees the quarterback, and he goes, nope, and backs off just enough so he'd throw it. He knew exactly what was coming. He got tight. He saw the quarterback look over, and he said, no, okay, I'm just going to back up. I'm going to relax. Baloney. He was like, go ahead. I'm giving you enough rope. And he did it. And he went right. And he was there before the ball was there. He didn't catch it, but it was a clean, solid PBU. So you see that anticipation, like you said, two-way go every route. Got to have it at the nickel. Yeah. It bugs me that a lot of people are like, well, I don't think he's big enough for outside. He's just a nickel. It's like, no, that doesn't, it's the whole tackle guard thing on defense, right? Just because he's not a boundary corner size or spec in the NFL doesn't mean he's a great nickel, because it's actually harder as a rookie. You need to do more. You don't have the field to work with and usually don't have the safety help, at least until you get deeper. So, but it'll be fascinating to see how they deploy him. hopefully we get to see the back end of that defense healthy. And like you said,
Yeah.
with their line, they don't have to cover for long. It's not going to be 5-second reps for them. You're not going to be standing up that long against Bosa and everybody else in that line. So it'll be really interesting to see how that particular two high shell comes together in the first year of Staley being there.
Yeah, and plus with Staley, he is excellent. We did a lot in the NFL matchup show last year at ESPN on the Rams defensive front. Now, obviously, you say they have Aaron Donald. I understand that. But look at the production he got out of Leonard Floyd. Okay, why did you get that? You got Leonard Floyd a lot of one-on-ones. You know, you can, if you get a one-on-one as a defensive end, edge rusher in the NFL, you got to win those one-on-ones. He put him in a lot of one-on-one situations because he'd run tilted fronts, he'd run overload fronts, a lot of twists and stunts to get guys free. And then you have Donald inside who would occupy one, sometimes two blockers at a time. That's how you scheme pass rush. You're seeing that more and more across the NFL. Teams are using their fronts to scheme those rushes. One player I thought about immediately in the draft class was Kwity Paye out of Michigan, who went to Indianapolis with DeForest Buckner and Stewart inside. They'll run the tilted front. What I mean by tilted front, guys, is just you have your four-man front. You have someone over nose, someone over the tackle, someone over the end. So right now you're going to get three-man slide and protection. Well, it's 3-on-3. And then when you have 3-on-3, you can do whatever you want. You can run double picks with a looper. You can run just a basic TE stunt outside. What you're doing now is trying to take advantage of the one-on-one matchups by using twists, stunts, and loops to get a guy free. And Kwity Paye, with his short area burst and explosive traits, even though he's not fully developed as a pass rusher, because no one is when they come to the NFL, that's how you create production with him. And I think DeForest Buckner, outside of Aaron Donald, is the most disruptive interior defender in the NFL.
And Kwity Paye specifically, as you mentioned, he's so strong. I can't remember what game it was that Michigan did it last year, but they ran a pirate stunt with him where he just caved in multiple offensive linemen and just had the looper go around him. And he's one of those guys where the production doesn't really match the tape because he's so strong and so explosive, and even though he's only 260 pounds, he's got the power of somebody who's like 285. And so even with how mobile DeForest is for being almost 300 pounds, even if Quity's not the finisher, the fact that he's so strong and you can put him honestly anywhere from a 4 out to a 9 and you can do something, maybe even a 3 with how strong he is, like in like a 3rd and 9 situation.
Right.
The fact that he's strong enough to just create disruption for other people to work off of him, I think that's probably a big reason why they took him, is because they wanted more power with their defensive ends so that they could do more stuff with their interior rushers, because their interior line was kind of what they were banking on last year. Now, I did have one question for you, since you are a DB coach, and I know you watched a lot of DBs this year. Were there any receivers that popped out while you watched these DBs, and as a former DB, where you're like, man, I'm really happy I didn't have to cover that dude?
Well, obviously the top 3 you look at, Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase reminds me of playing against Steve Smith. And Steve Smith was the ultimate competitor. Physical play style, physical traits. Had a high-end catch and run ability. Can make plays on contested throws, can also stretch you vertically on third level throws. That's what I see with Jamar Chase. I wrote about Chase in Cincinnati. There's not as much working back with Burrow. It's at Cincinnati, heavy 11 personnel, right? It's 3 wide receiver set, 1 running back, 1 tight end, 3 wide receivers. He'd be on the field with T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. So many crossers, so many overs, so many high-low drive routes to get him loose in space, because he's in a battle on every play. He's going to battle on every play. I remember playing against Steve Smith. This was 2002. I was at the Packers. We ran some blitz stunt, and it was a poor design because I had to cover Steve Smith. That's not good football. And Steve caught like a quick hitter, like a slant, and I went to tackle him. He face masked me and basically lifted me off the ground. I was in panic mode because I was in mid-air, like parallel to the ground. Grabbed his face mask. While I was pulling down, I'll take the 15-yard penalty. Nope. Ripped through that one for about 80 yards. One of the toughest guys I've ever seen in my career. But Chase reminds me of that, just because I think he can be schemed up. He can be a volume target in that offense. Jalen Waddle, we talked about a matchup with Greg Cosell. Jalen Waddle can be deployed like Tyreek Hill. There's no question. He'd be number 3 to trips, run the deep overs in the crosser, and absolutely just run away from man coverage. run away from man coverage because we know he has a top end speed. He's got some nuance as a route runner as well. I also think he can be. We use the term motion movement wide receivers. It was Jalen Waller, Kadarius Toney, Elijah Moore, Rondale Moore. Because in today's NFL, those guys are schemed so much on misdirection. Amari Rodgers in Green Bay is another one. These heavy motion offenses. That's where the fly sweeps come into play. That's where the key screens come into play off RPOs. That's where the wide receiver reverses come in. Just like we see with Deebo Samuel in San Francisco. High level catch and run ability, can be schemed as slot targets, but also can excel on manufactured touches. That's what we see with Tyreek Hill. How often do we see Tyreek Hill motion into the backfield, run stretcher outside zone, or to catch the ball, motion in the backfield, run a swing route, catch the ball in space? There's so many ways you can utilize talent like that because all these guys are extremely sudden movers. The top end speed is one thing. It's the sudden movement ability. Kadarius Toney, that jumps off the film with me when I watch Toney. I mean, his sudden ability after the catch to beat defenders in space. I mean, he's almost a slasher in terms of how he runs in the open field, but he's so sudden. Elijah Moore, I mean, you talk about toughness and being a volume target in the slot with the route running traits. I really like the tape on Elijah Moore. I think it's a great landing spot. Now, obviously, there's competition there for any rookies. There's going to be an adjustment. But Michael LaFleur's offense, okay, with Zach Wilson at quarterback, he's going to be the guy that's going to be schemed on jets. He's going to be the guy who's going to get a line in the backfield to run seam routes and all go H seam. There's a lot of things you can do with him. But to answer your question, obviously Jamar Chase, obviously Devonta Smith, we know about that. But Jalen Waddle, if I was a safety, that would worry me. It would really worry me because I think he can get up and go and beat you at any level. He can run double moves down the field. He can stretch you vertically, run away from you on overs and crossers. And then if you scheme up on a screen, you got to tackle him. He's a physical runner too after the catch. But I mentioned Amari Rodgers. We obviously know we don't know what the quarterback situation in Green Bay is going to be week one. We can all say that. We don't officially know that. But you have to look at the system, regardless of who's playing quarterback. Green Bay ran motion over 50% of their snaps last year. And he's a guy that can be utilized in that system, just like we saw with Tyler Ervin last couple of years in Green Bay as that jet guy, that fly sweep guy. And also he can stretch you vertically down the field. I think that's how the game is changing. I'm not saying you don't need to be an elite route runner. You do. You have to be able to create separation as a route runner. But with these guys who have those dynamic playmaking traits, there's different ways to get them the football as they develop in an NFL roster. And while they're developing an NFL roster, you can scheme those guys open and cater to those traits where now they become explosive play weapons in your offense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things I like most about Elijah Moore that you mentioned is it's not a projection for him with all those touches. Lane Kiffin did all that stuff with him at Ole Miss, right? Mm-hmm. You've seen all of that on film, and he's been successful in all of it. Straight line up in the slot, rotate to outside, tap pass, jet screens, bubbles, you name it. Line him up straight in the backfield, run him as a decoy. They did that too, and then they hand it off to Kenny Yeboah going the other way off inline. Like all that stuff has already been done. So when you get him, it's not like, well, we hope he can do this or we hope he can pick it up. Like, hey, remember that thing you did last year? We're going to do it here. And Rodgers the same way. They lined him up in the backfield at his pro day. He's built like a running back. Great route runner. Showed that at the Senior Bowl. Great hands. But again, is he, at Tyler Ervin's level or maybe even better? Physically, yeah. Mentally, he's got to grow into the game and the speed. You talked about the speed of the NFL. He's got to make those adjustments, but he's got all those abilities, and they used him that way in his college scheme. So, have at it.
Yeah, another guy I mentioned is Dwayne Eskridge from Western Michigan. Another guy who had a great week in the Senior Bowl, obviously. Mm-hmm. You watch his tape on RPO throws. And obviously, RPO for your listeners, run pass option, as you guys know. Mm-hmm. They run the quick glance route, I call it. It's just almost like a deeper slant. I mean, he's got an easy accelerator in the open field. He can get up and go. A little tight-hipped. Okay, you can see that on his film, a little functional hip tightness, which is fine. A lot of players have that. But in terms of a straight line speed, and that's going to be very interesting in Seattle this year. Do they become a little bit more passive? They become a little bit more aggressive in the pass game? Because right now they're top three. You got DK, you got Tyler Lockett, and now you got a Dwayne Eskridge who brings explosive playability to your offense as well. And again, fits the modern NFL. That's where this whole discussion is going. We talk about the split safety coverage. You look at the linebackers in this class. With Davis, Micah Parsons, Xavier Collins, Chad Surratt, who I really liked. I think is an ascending player still developing out of North Carolina that went to Minnesota. these second-level linebackers. And, I think it's interesting, because I know the NFL does this as well at an NFL matchup show. We base a lot of our draft show off the Super Bowl, right? So we looked at second-level linebackers, Devin White, Levante David, the impact they had in that Tampa defense. You remember the Super Bowl, they were playing two-man. Levante David was matched up to Travis Kelce. And you talk about the toughest matchup in the league, that's one of them right there. But their second-level range, the ability to run and hit, cut off the ball in the run game. And I know you guys watched this. You remember the Monday night game this year, and LA beat Tampa, but it was that Monday night game with the Rams and Tampa. And LA had to go to empty. They couldn't get to the edge. They couldn't run outside zone. Because you got guys like Sue eating up interior blockers, Pierre-Paul setting the edge, and these linebackers were running free to the football. They can simply not get to the edge because of the speed, the cutoff angles, to play cutoff and force and run support. That stuff still matters. It still matters. So the linebackers that went in this class as well, the top end guys, they have the traits, or the multi-dimensional traits, really, to play in today's game.
And what was interesting about that LA Tampa game, because I remember I was watching it, and something that they adjusted early in that game is anytime they tried to get those linebackers to pause, because they're like, well, they both run 4.4, 4.5, so they're going to get there just on speed. So they tried to get him to take false steps with jets. And so then Bull started playing one high, and he would start here, and then as soon as the jet would go, they just spin the safeties so they would get leverage to the jet, and the linebackers didn't have to worry about it at all. And there was nothing they could do. Like, once the jet was taken out of the equation, and obviously, Sue's disrupting inside, the linebackers didn't even get blocked. All they had to do was, I'm just going to go to the C gap, and that's my guy. And that was it. It was brilliant.
Really not a major adjustment, right? It's just smart defensive football. Let's get numbers advantage with our safeties, so our linebackers can track the run game in the box. Okay, you're not recreating football. You're just recreating smart football. That's what the best defensive coordinators do. They don't make it overcomplicated. They find a way to get numbers advantage and to keep a numbers advantage in the box at the same time. So basically, a way to cut off the ball on the edge and keep those players in the box. I agree. That was excellent football. Now, we haven't talked about Kyle Pitts.
Not yet, but
where do you start?
There's a lot of ink on that guy. He's just getting started, because the whole debate about I'll just ask you how you felt about the whole debate of wide receiver, tight end, because to me, that's two letters in front of his name, and he can do either. And he demonstrated that. It's not a projection. You're an Iowa guy, right? It's not an Iowa tight end coming out who had 6 catches in his college career, and you're like, maybe he could be a 100-catch guy. Like, Pitts has done all that already. It doesn't matter about alignment. It doesn't matter who he was lined up against. He went against Horn. He went against everybody. He had production. Now, he had battles, but he had production, and high-level production on, I'm going to say, not the greatest throws, right? Everybody was all over Kyle Trask, but Kyle Pitts was making Kyle Trask look good and not necessarily the other way around most of the time. So how did you feel about that whole, he should be a wide receiver, or, we should leave him at tight end?
I think you just get the ball to him, right? Doesn't matter, okay? Because you bring up a great point. He did against Horn. I remember running a great slant route against Patrick Tan. He can match up versus anyone. I'm very interested to see how he's utilized or deployed in the Atlanta offense, because, look, he's going to be attached to the core of the formation at times, too. They're going to do it when they run their plashing game or run boot, get him loose in the flat, create some catch and run opportunities. But he can play in the slot. He can play as your boundary X wide receiver, where now he has a similar skill set to Mike Evans, in my opinion. One player I comped him to, and as because I played against him at the college level and the pro level, is Plaxico Burress. Because what he can do is the boundary X wide receiver. He can out-muscle defensive backs to the point of attack. He can create vertical separation. He can win on end breakers on the deep dig route that breaks between 12 and 15 yards. He's got a great catch radius. He can be isolated inside the red zone as well. To the backside, 3-1, slanter fade. Just tell him with the line of scrimmage, I'm going to run a slanter fade. You know it's coming. You got to stop me. A rare talent. Because really what he is, he's a guy who's a tight end body and the traits of a wide receiver. So that it opens up multiple possibilities. You can run heavy 12 personnel and be your move tight end. You can run 11 personnel, which basically looks like 10 personnel with him on the field now. Really, you're dictating to the defense. So what are you going to do when you have 12 in the field? If you have 12 in the field and don't have a matchup for this young man, then we're going to keep going to him. So are you going to play base? Probably not. You're probably going to bring your sub in when Kyle Pitts is in the field. That's going to open up run game opportunities for a team that we know, the new head coach in Atlanta, that's going to be pretty balanced. It might even be a little run heavy at times because they're going to set up Matt Ryan at this stage of his career, more high percentage throws, more scheme throws down the field. And with Kyle Pitts, like we said, just completely opens up your game plan because the matchability, all three levels of the field, can produce after the catch, can stretch you vertically, and can win one-on-ones. Now, that's an offense now. You look at their skill talent, that can be a tough matchup. It's depending on how structured they're going to be under the new head coach as well. Yeah,
Julio, Pitts, Ridley, the running backs that they've got there, because they got some. I mean, Mike Davis, I still think is a good player. Like, that's a tough offense to stop. Not to mention they've got 5 former first-round picks on the offensive line, a former MVP quarterback, an offensive system that's proven. That's tough, man. I wouldn't want to be a defensive coordinator in the NFC South. I think Aaron Glenn got out at just the right time. Just saying. Oh, man. But we really appreciated having you, Matt. This was a blast. You're one of the best follows in all of football media for people that want to learn the game. And at their core, I think football fans love learning football, which is why I very much enjoy your work. When I was at NFL Network for 5 years, one of the key things that we like to emphasize there was like, don't treat the audience as stupid. Believe that they know what you're talking about. And that's what I've always loved about everything you did, is you believe that the audience knows what you're talking about, and you make it easily translatable to people so they do know what you're talking about. And it's I can't thank you enough for everything you do.
I appreciate it, but I'll tell you what, I learned that from someone else. No one has created football on their own. So I owe a lot of that to the coaches I played for. Even going back to Jim Covert, my high school coach at Glenbard West here in the Chicago area. You always learn from someone, right? And you can still learn. The greatest thing I've done is coach at the high school level. I've been an IC Catholic for 6 years now. And just to learn the spread offense, because I never saw that as a player. I'll be honest, my freshman year, and I went to Iowa as a quarterback, okay? So my freshman year, I was a scout team quarterback, and that was under Hayden Fry. I was old school. I had a red jersey on. It did not matter. Those guys would bury me. And, I remember simulating Iowa State running the triple option. You run a triple option against 22-year-old seniors and you're 18 years old. It was long.
Good luck.
It was a long week. But the point is, I never saw the spread. Now, we saw a little bit of it when Drew Brees was at Purdue. And we did not play well that week, I'll tell you right now, against Drew and that Purdue team when they went to the Rose Bowl. But that was empty. That was spread. That was bubble screens. That was all coming into the Big Ten at that time. So for me to coach at the high school level, to understand offensive line play more, understand the quarterback position more, to understand RPOs and the conflict defenders and how to count numbers in the box, that was all new to me. It really was. So again, I learned that from someone else. And I think it's a great thing about this game. I think it's a great thing about social media in our business right now is you can learn from people. I follow a ton of coaches. I learn from high school coaches all over the country right now and guys in our business who are looking at things with a different angle. We're all in this together. We're all collaborative on it, but you can always learn from each other something you might see. Maybe it's a technique. Maybe it's a drill. I love studying drills on Twitter because there's new ways to teach. There's new ways to develop young players that I coach at the high school level. So I've always been appreciative of that. And it took me time, guys. When I first started, I was writing. When I first started, I was at grad school at DePaul in Chicago. I was writing for the Chicago Sun-Times in a paper called the Washington Examiner, which doesn't even exist anymore. And I was using our terminology from Greg Williams. It was like Tiger Ace. No one knew what I was talking about. So that was a lesson for me to understand that some of this terminology, I have no idea. And I see it now on Twitter sometimes, or sometimes I don't exactly understand what they're talking about. So it took me time to understand that, like you said, you understand that people are smart. You still have to present it in a format where people can learn from it and understand it. So that took me time as well, just to understand the terminology that works, whether it's in, doing a podcast or doing the matchup show or writing at ESPN in a way that people can learn from it. Because I agree with you. I think it is a teaching tool every time you go on that website. And there's great things to learn from.
That's my favorite thing about you and your presentation is that you are a teacher at heart and you learn those lessons well, because the way you're able to communicate is, to me, again, having watched your career for a long time, very purposeful And you continue, I think, to be one of the leaders there to push the edge, to communicate in a way that people can understand. And we had, I was lucky enough to have Robert Mays on a podcast earlier this year. And Robert is the same way. He's very introspective about how, he said, I spent a lot of time this year thinking about how I wanted to talk about the game.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have that focus and you have that lifelong learning bent, that teachers are learners and learners are teachers, that's a really powerful combination. And it comes together with your experience and the fact that you've still got your hand in it and that you still want to learn, and all those things come through in your work, which is why you're absolutely one of my favorites, is because you don't try and overwhelm people. You're always trying to teach people, and you're reacting to the folks who are reading and listening and learning and saying, was that right? Was it too much? How do I adjust that? And you're at a very fine point, I would say, of expertise right now. So I can't thank you enough for spending some time with us tonight and being gracious with that.
Well, I appreciate it, guys. I really do. That means a lot to me. And, you know, I've told people before, working with Greg Cosell at Matchup, and we have ex-coaches, ex-scouts who work with us on that show. It's like a graduate course in football. So I'm still learning as well. I mean, I really am still learning as well from the guys in that building. And that's been very beneficial to me as well. But that's the thing. You never stop learning, right?
Never.
Yeah. And the good news, you're on the ground floor for all the stuff that's going to be in the NFL in 10 years, because all that spread stuff you saw for the first time against Drew Brees, well, that came from Dennis Erickson, who was at Purdue, or no, he was at Wyoming, and the coach from Wyoming picked it up from Dennis Erickson and took it from Purdue, and Dennis Erickson got it from Jack Elway when they was at San Jose State, and Jack Elway got it from Granada Hills High School when his son John played there under Jack Neumeyer, and they invented the spread there. So in 20 years, whatever you're seeing there at IC, we're going to see on Sundays. So feel free to let us know what's going on down there, what wild stuff you find out.
Well, I'll tell you what, you know, the great thing about IC is that we're a smaller school. You know, we only have about 360 students. So when we come to state playoff time, we play in a lower class in Illinois. There's 8 classes in Illinois. We're usually 3 or 4A. So we will go down south and out in western part of the state. We will play double wing. If you're not ready to play against a double wing, it is a long day.
Done.
You're ready to defend, counter, and superpower, and play action flat 7 when you're least expecting it. That is tough. This year we played St. Ignatius. Now, obviously we didn't have a fall season. We played a spring season. We played St. Ignatius, Chicago Catholic League team, and they run the beer. Okay? So if you're not ready for inside and outside beer, you will get gassed.
Yeah.
All it takes is one. You can play 50 straight plays of that perfectly. It takes one where you don't squeeze on inside beer, and that thing is gone, is out the gate.
Yeah, you got to pick up one of those old,
game, but it was a battle, and that's the great thing about playing at a smaller level. You see the spread, you see 21 personnel, you'll see 12, you'll see double wing, you'll see single wing, you'll see the veer, you'll see the bone. So you see everything, and it makes for great football because every in the state playoffs every week's a different challenge.
Yeah.
So it's a blast. I love it.
Oh man, I can't imagine a better challenge. Or no wonder you're there at 9:42 at night on a Tuesday. I'll just say that. That's the life of a high school football coach is a lot of long hours there, Matt. But we appreciate you coming on. This was a blast. We'll have to have you on again soon.
I'd love to do it again, guys. Thank you very much.
And with that, EJ, why don't we call it an episode? That was a great talk with Matt. Hopefully he'll be back soon. One of the best in the business, easily. You and I have both followed his work since before we were even doing this, so having him on the show was just a fantastic dream come true for both of us. I think that was the perfect capper for this show. Before we get out of here, though, what are you working on, and what are you excited about coming up in the world of EJ Snyder?
Yeah, it's divisional previews for Bootleg for the most part. Couple other smaller projects floating around. We'll see if they come to fruition, but really it's diving into the divisional previews. We did these as, I don't want to say filler last year, but it was like, what should we do? It's the whole off season. We're like, we'll talk about every team and all the divisions and everything they did. Yeah, that's a good idea. It turned out to be tremendously educational, and I think set me up for sure with a better basis for the league. I've always followed the draft, but going through every team's roster and every team's free agent edition, every team's coaching situation really set me up for the NFL season in a way that I've never done before, and gave me such a good understanding of who was on each team, where the weaknesses were, where they'd be. I remember us talking about Arizona last summer, and it was like, man, they have a ton of depth. They have a ton of talent at the top level, but once you get through that crust, there's a lot of places in their rosters where the verticals don't look as good. And sure enough, had a couple of key injuries early on, and they struggled. And it's that kind of work that sets you up for that kind of analysis. So that's really what's next. It's a ton of work. It's a ton of fun, and it's incredibly valuable. So we're going to be diving into that after this, and that's largely where I'm focused. And then we're talking about some fun stuff. We're talking about dates during the season, games we might go to, things that we're going to be able to do to interact with fans, because fully vaccinated now. So the ability to, jump on an airplane is not quite so intimidating, and go see an NFL game and say, hey, if you're in town, come see us. We'll have a table, we'll be at a bar, whatever. We really wanted to do that last year. We kind of felt like you guys did, that we got robbed of that. And we're looking forward to it. So we're making some plans. We'll definitely let everybody know as much ahead of time as we can, if we're going to be in a city or at a game, so that if you're around, you have a chance to come out. We'd love to see you. But that's really exciting. And again, folks back in even just pads and shells doing off-season workout, starting to feel like football again. I know somebody put up a thing this week on Twitter that said only 16 more Sundays without NFL football. And I was like, I don't want to skip all of summer and camping and cookouts. Is it really
that few? Is it that few already?
I didn't check the math. I'm just saying.
Oh, my God.
So, yeah, it feels like we got a lot of time coming up. Like we're just, sort of capping out of spring and heading towards summer. But at the same time, you and I are looking at schedules for the fall, and we're talking about the divisional preview. That's going to take us the next 2 months, one a week, 8 weeks. And I don't know. It's a lot of fun. It's a reset. We're starting over. The calendar's kind of turned with the draft and the off season, but doing this every week is always a good time. And then we're going to have some live events throughout the summer where we do bootleg drafts for Underdog, and we invite fans to draft with us or against us in little contests that they have, do some giveaways. So just a lot going on all over the place. Still going to be fleshing out the guest roster when we can. I feel super lucky. I feel amazingly lucky to have fans that care about what we do, and just a place to sort of share our ideas, and people have resonated to that. And we're just really, really fortunate. So we're in a good spot, and lots of good content to come. What do you got going? I know you've got some big ones brewing.
Yeah. So I did absolutely echo your sentiment. We get to talk about football for a living, and that's an amazing career. And I am going to be catching up on my travel per se, because I didn't do any travel last year for obvious reasons. And so I just turned 30 last week, and I was like, I missed the entire last year of my 20s, and I didn't get to do anything because the world was crazy. So I'm going to make my 30th year the best year I can, and I'm going to travel to as many NFL games as I can. So I'm going to be on the road a lot this season, and you'll be there with me for a lot of that as well. We're planning on going to Bears-Rams week 1 down here in my neck of the woods in LA. And then I got a big trip that I'm planning, which seems like it's definitely going to happen. So I feel like I can talk about it now, where I'm going to 6 games in 15 days. LA, Dallas, Cincy, New England. I'll be there when Tom Brady gets to go back to New England. And then I got a week to drive down to meet our buddy Craig in Kansas City, and hopefully you'll be there too for Bills at Kansas City. And then I'm flying back on the red eye that night because I got to catch Raiders-Chargers back at SoFi the next day. So I'm going to be in a whole bunch of cities. Again, LA, Dallas. I'll probably stop in Memphis, Nashville, Louisville, Cincy, Cleveland, Scranton, if we got any Scranton. I've been looking at hotels in Scranton on the way to the New England
Not that far
game.
from the place of my birth. So
I'm going to hit New York City. I'm going to hit Baltimore, D.C. I'm going to stop off at my favorite distillery on planet Earth, Virginia Distillery Company, on the way back to the Kansas City game. I'll hit St. Louis. Keep an eye out on my Twitter, on my Instagram, and I'll kind of have like a full schedule of where I'm going to be this season. And EJ's going to join me for as much of that as he can, but he's got kids and a family and life commitments that he gets to have, and so he'll be there for a few games. But I'm going to be in a lot of different cities, coming to a city near you pretty soon here. So I'll keep you guys apprised of my schedule, and we'll meet up. We'll have a beer. We'll have some barbecue. We'll do something. It'll be fun. I think it's going to be a great season. A new dawn is rising for the Bootleg Football Podcast, and I personally can't wait. So thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you for making this possible, for one. Thank you to Underdog for helping to make it possible as well. We couldn't do it without them. And we'll be back in a few days starting these division-by-division previews, the mother of all offseason content. So I hope you'll join us for that. And until then, later.
Take care.